recording now.
God bless you and greetings to you in the name of Jesus Christ. My name is Gary Theisen, and I am very passionate about the things we're going to be talking about this morning. And I just love the stuff that's going on in the heavens. We're going to talk about stars and the feasts of God from the Old Testament and how all those things collide to help us learn more about what God is up to both now and in the future. This is going to be recorded. We're going to put it on YouTube. I believe we'll put it under the title of Lift Up Your Eyes, Star Update 2016, and you'll see that slide come by in a little bit. But Lift Up Your Eyes, Star Update 2016 will be the words you can put in to YouTube to find this teaching. It is going to take a little bit of time to go through everything, so if you do it in little bits and pieces, I think it still will convey what it needs to convey. The Bible I'm going to be using is the Revised English Version. It can be found on stfonline.org. That's all one word, stfonline.org. And the Revised English Version is a passion of John Shainheit, and with the staff and the friends and partners of STF, it's a wonderful version of the Bible that has hundreds and hundreds of pages of commentary to go with many of the verses and the words and the concepts in the Bible. So that's a great place to go to get more information. So I'm going to put my slides on, and we're going to get started. So this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible because I believe this is the key to understanding truth versus tradition. There's a lot of things that we believe about God and about God's Word that don't fit with the overall picture of God's intent.
Hey, Gary?
Yes.
Did you just try and share your desktop because it didn't share?
Okay, hang on. Oh, you know what? We took it out of share, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay. So don't worry, we'll edit this part out.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. All right, so let's get back to this. Now, I'm not the most technologically minded person, and so if things do not appear to be done by people from IBM, that's for good reason. So let's try this. Okay, so this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, and it is a wonderful verse to show that there's much depth to God's Word, and things that appear to be right on the surface of our understanding probably have layers and layers of things we don't really get. But the beauty of God's Word is that it will speak to us no matter our time of life. You know, I know as we get older, we see things differently than we were younger. But God's Word also speaks to us no matter what our mental time for our mental set is at the time, whether we're angry or sad or happy or, you know, whatever is going on in our life. The beauty of God's Word is that it has layers upon layers, and it speaks to us all the time. So, for instance, this teaching, I did this teaching live in Atlanta in September. I've already added many, many slides and changed some of the things that I've said. And so every time I do this, it's different, because every time I look at this, God speaks in the kaleidoscope that is God's Word. And so it's very, very interesting to really get into God's Word. Okay, let's see here. There we go. So this really is a key verse for this teaching, because it makes the end known from the beginning. So this is Isaiah chapter 46. It says, I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, and from ancient times what is still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. And really, to learn more about the things in the future, we can see the patterns and the symmetry of God from what he has done before. And so this is a great verse to really dig into God's Word and see the many wonders that are yet to come. And these are also some of my favorite verses. This is from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9. It says, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And actually, this is repeated again in chapter 3. It says, whatever is has been long ago, and whatever is to be has been long ago. And so some people read this and think, well, there's nothing new under the sun. It's sort of the same old, same old. But actually, I see it completely different. And I see that the patterns of what he has done in olden time help us to see what's being done now and in the future. But also the opposite is true as well. And the patterns of what we see now can help us go back and see what God did in olden days. And I will show you that there's some patterns that we have learned from the stars of things that are coming up, that once we knew those patterns, we have looked back in time to say, wow, has God ever done this kind of thing before? And sure enough, at the time of creation, which is 4000 BC, we are going to see a pattern that God is going to do in the future. And so we saw the future pattern, and then we went back and said, wow, has God done this before? And so something prophetic that's going to happen in the future was marked by a star pattern that now we've gone back to see he has done this exact same star pattern before. And actually, this has occurred several times. And I am already planning Star Update 2017, which would be next year's Star Update. And I believe I can show the star pattern that the wise men saw when they went to find the Messiah, because the exact pattern that is going to happen next year was done in a different constellation in 2 BC, which is about the time we think the Messiah was born. And so I believe I've seen what the new patterns are showing us, and I can go back and show something that happened in olden day. And so it's not same old, but what has been done in the past is going to be done in the future. And whichever part of the thread you start with, whether past or future, you can begin to pull on that thread and see the many things that God has done. Now, all this has to fit with the symmetry of God. And this is part of what helps us to discern truth from tradition, because the symmetry of God is really how he has operated in the past. And, God shows his, I call it the symmetry. Think of it like the seasons. There's spring, and there's summer, and there's fall, and there's winter. And it happens over and over and over. And God's symmetry shows up in that pattern. And the Word of God is the same way. There's a symmetry in how he does things. There's a symmetry in how he says things. And the symmetry of things he's shown us in his Word has to fit not only with what we see in the past, but what we see in the future. So now, this is a huge key. And I believe the reason that we're here this morning, because I believe that God continues to reveal his plans as we move through time. And there's an amazing verse in Daniel, and it's in Daniel chapter 12, and it's God speaking to, actually it's the angel speaking to Daniel, and it says this, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. Even to the end of time, knowledge will be increased." He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end." So this is very interesting. And these verses have gotten people's attention over many, many years, and actually many, many centuries, because people have always wondered, well, what exactly was sealed up? And how are we going to know this stuff? Is God going to reveal us to this in the end time? How exactly is this going to work? And I believe that right now we are going to talk about things that have only come to light in the last few years. Now, they've always been present. I mean, those verses from Daniel have been present. What the stars are doing has been, going on forever. But I believe it's only been in the last few years, as our knowledge has increased, that we've had new interest and insights into God's calendars. The feast days have always been there, but I think now that we see more insight into God's feast, we're really beginning to put together the times of the end. And really, we have technology that's always getting new and improved, And it's only been lately that we've had all these star programs that have allowed us not only to see the stars in the present, but what the stars are going to do in the future. And as we see the future patterns, we've gone back into the past thousands of years. I mean, these star programs are amazing. Go back thousands of years and see that, oh my gosh, this pattern has happened before. And you know what? It happened at a very significant time. And you know what? I bet that when this pattern was happening, this was going on in God's story. And so we are only scratching the surface. So we're putting it together. We're beginning to see the signs of the times. And literally, probably every slide I'm going to show you, we could go on and on and on and on about every single slide because there's so much depth to this. And so we are just scratching the surface. And so as I'm talking today, and as you're watching this on YouTube, you can find many YouTubes now that are breaking down every little aspect of what I'm going to share with you today. Today I'm putting together the bare skeleton of this whole story, and it's not short, but it is amazing. And you can take any little aspect of this and really run with it. And so let's get started. So this is the title that I'm titling it. This is the title we're going to make the YouTube so that when you want to go back and look at this, in real life, I am an anesthesiologist. And so I always tell people when I talk, if you find yourself getting sleepy, remember you are in the hands of a professional. So if you need something to help you sleep, get my YouTube out and start watching it. Probably in no time you'll be out. But if you find yourself getting sleepy, just pause where you are in the YouTube and go back and pick it up from there, because there's a lot of amazing things we're going to talk about this morning. All right, so really there's two calendars we need to talk about. God's timing is the combination of two separate calendars. And really you can think of these as God's timepieces. They are really his clocks. And so the first timepiece are the lights of heaven. And this is talked about in Genesis chapter 1. The second timepiece are the feasts of Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is the Hebrew name for God. It's in the King James Version. It's written as the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, and that's always the word Yahweh or Jehovah. We really don't know how it's pronounced. But the seven feasts of Yahweh and the lights of heaven are the two calendars that God puts together to reveal his long-term prophetic plans. And I believe this is part of what's come to light in these end times, and I believe we are in the end times. I certainly don't think we have another 1,000 years to go before Jesus comes back. I think we're within a few years, could be a decade or two, could be as short as a couple of months. So we really don't know. But certainly things in the earth are shaping up to be pointing to us in a certain specific direction. So we're going to talk about these two calendars. So first, let's talk about the lights of heaven. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 says, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." Now, the word signs is the Hebrew word hoth, which means things to come. The word seasons is moed, and moed means an appointed time, and in the Bible, it's also used for the word feast. So the signs and the seasons are things to come and the appointed times. And then he mentions days and years. Now, I just saw this recently. It's like, we always think the lights of heaven are for days and years, but you know what? That's the last thing they're for. They're really for the things to come and the appointed times, and then the days and the years. So, the first calendar. What are the lights of heaven? Well, in order of brightness, they are the sun, the moon, and then the planets. Now, back then, they would not have known they were planets. All they knew that they were stars that wandered. And planet literally means wanderer. It's actually a Greek word, so in the New Testament, planet means wanderer. And then the stars. And so the sun's the brightest, then the moon, then the planets, and then the stars. And then there's also phenomena. We have eclipses, we have comets that come in and out of our solar system. We have supernova, which do occur over time. and other things. So there's always something going on in the heavens. Well, the sun marks the day and the night. So the sun shows the days. And in the Hebrew calendar, in the Hebrew lifestyle, every new day starts at sunset. So the sun marks the days. The moon has different phases, and over the course of 28 days, the phases of the moon is a complete cycle. So the moon shows the months, and every new month starts on a new moon. And then the stars, the constellations, show the years, because the trip of the sun through every constellation that touches the path of the sun, that would be the zodiac. We would know that as the zodiac, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Every trip of the sun around the zodiac is a year. So in God's clock, the sun is like the second hand. It's the fastest moving hand. It shows the days and the years. The moon in its phases of each month shows the month. So it's like the minute hand. It's the next quickest hand. And then the stars, the constellation, is really like the hour hand. It shows the years. So on God's clock, the sun is like the second hand, the moon is like the minute hand, and the stars are like the hour hand. And the sun and the moon and the constellations move in a predictable pattern. There's no variation. I mean, no, there has been little things where the sun stood still or the sun even went backwards. But in general, unless there's phenomena from God, there is a very predictable pattern. Year in, year out, day in, day out, month in, month out. There's no variation in those things. But yet, God says the lights in heaven are to show the things to come, and they're to show the appointed time. So we need some variability. If God's heavens are going to point out things that are going to occur outside the norm, then there needs to be something that's variable besides the way the sun moves, and besides the way the moon moves, and besides the way the stars move. Well, the stars actually don't move, but there's no variability is my point. And so that is where the planets come in. So the planets are the things that move. So we have, and this is in order of brightness, we have Venus, the bright and morning star. We have Jupiter, which is called the king planet. We have Mars, we have Mercury, and we have Saturn. Now, those are those are really the only distinguishable planets with the naked eye. So Uranus, they didn't know about that. Neptune, they didn't know about that. Poor Pluto, which got demoted, they didn't know anything about Pluto. But those 5 planets are the ones they would have seen in the sky, and the ones that have all the variability. So each of those planets, because of its distance from the sun, run on different timetables. They lap and overlap each other. Venus and Mercury are the ones closest to the sun, so they're always near the sun. Mercury can only be seen in the dusk, and Mercury can only be seen in the dawn, because once the sun comes up, or while the sun is up, the sun is too bright to see Mercury. Venus is a little farther out, so it lingers a little more in the evening sky. It lingers a little more in the morning sky. But these are always near the sun. Mars, which is farther out than we are, takes about 2 years to orbit the sun. And Jupiter and Saturn, which are way, way out there, take even longer. Now, it's interesting to note that Jupiter takes 12 years to orbit the sun. And how many constellations are there in the zodiac? 12. I don't think it's any coincidence that Jupiter spends a year in each of the signs of the zodiac. And I believe there's a messianic pattern there that we can see, because as I said, Jupiter's the king planet. One of the aspects of the Messiah is represented in Jupiter. And there's something about him visiting his people, or being with each of the tribes of earth for a year. I don't know what that is, but there's going to be a pattern we'll see in the future, and we'll go, that's why Jupiter takes 12 years to orbit the sky, because there's some attribute of the Messiah that makes that so. All right, and Saturn takes 30 years to go around the sky. That's like forever. So Saturn moves very slowly through the sky. All right, now here's the deal. Because they all run in independent cycles, they form a nearly infinite pattern of combinations. So there's conjunctions where they're close together. There's oppositions where they're on opposite ends of the solar system. They're one's on one side, one's on the other. There's alignments where they all get together and line up. And through a thing called retrograde motion, they can appear to go backwards in the sky, which is an amazing thing. Because we're moving more quickly, we would pass Jupiter much more quickly. So Jupiter would look like it's moving forward, but as we go by it, it would look like it's moving backwards. And so there's a thing called retrograde motion, which planets actually appear to move in reverse motion. Now, they're not actually moving in reverse. They're always moving forward. But God set this up so that there's all kinds of amazing patterns that happen in the sky so we would see what he's up to. All right, so now you have the planets moving in all these crazy ways, and then you have the stars in the background. So you got the zodiac and all the constellations in the background, and the planets are moving on that backdrop. And so that adds to the complexity as well, because something happening in Taurus might mean something that's happening, that's something different that's happening in Virgo. And so there's just all this, intense and amazing background. And it's really like a kaleidoscope. And, a kaleidoscope is, that little thing you hold up to the light and turn the little edges, and just the patterns are really infinite. So now we have variability. And is this the key to God's divine appointment book? God has made an appointment with our destiny and the future of the earth and what's going on in the heavens. All this was set in motion thousands of years ago. And is this variability that we're seeing with the planets and the way the stars line up, is that the key to God's divine appointment book? And are the planets the part of the clock that tell the prophetic time? Now remember, the sun, the moon, the stars, they are not moving except in a very set pattern. And are the planets the part of the variability that help us to see what God is up to? And do these planets, and in their combinations, reveal the keys to his prophetic plan? And as I said, we've seen things that are happening in the future, and they're opening up keys to things he's done in the past that we have never gotten before. Now, the Magi are amazing because they saw something in the heaven, and it was the go sign. They saw something, and it lined up, and it was just to what they were expecting to see, and they said, we got to go see the Messiah. He's been born. And it couldn't have been just the day-to-day sun and moon, because that was not the variability. So was it this unique combination of planets, the sun, the moon, the background constellation that whatever was happening in, that got their attention? And the problem is this: we have lost our ability to tell God's time in his star time. So we know these things are happening, we know these patterns are important, but we're just not seeing it the way it needs to be seen. Now, I will say this: we've come a long way in the last couple of years. We've come a long way in the last 30 days. There are YouTubes going up now that are showing us things that we're going, wow, that's amazing. And so, you can find a lot of really interesting YouTubes out there that are saying these just these same kinds of things. And so really stay tuned, because every day something new and improved is showing up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the constellations. The constellations, the stars, don't tell your future. That's astrology. Astrology is really the bastardization of the stars. The astrologers take what God has set up to tell his story and use it to tell your story. It's like the most egocentric thing ever. It's not what it's meant to be. So the pictures of the stars really are to tell the redemption of mankind. They tell all about the Messiah, his prediction of coming, his first coming, his death and resurrection, and his second coming, which is yet future, and the millennial kingdom, and the new heaven and earth. All those stories are told in the stars. So really the constellations tell God's story. And really a very interesting book is E.W. Bullinger's Witness of the Stars. And his book, so this was written before 1900, so like 1886 or something like that. And his book was a compilation of a couple other people's works that are now lost to time. So it's great that, God inspired him to do this book, because the older works he took this from, a lot of them have been lost to time. And so really it's a great book to show God's story. And just a little thing about E.W. Bullinger's Witness of the Stars, and you may own this book, and actually you can get it on Kindle for free. So this book is out there. You can get it on Amazon, or I know you can get it on Kindle because I have it, and it was free. But if you have this book, I bet you didn't know this, there's a hidden chapter in the back of the book. It's not in the index. It's nowhere to be found. And unless you look for it, you won't find it. It's an absolutely hidden chapter. And it's not a short chapter, but if you haven't looked to see it, you won't find it. And find that hidden chapter. You will be unbelievably amazed at what he wrote about back at the turn of the century. And you'll just read it and go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. People were already thinking this way this long ago. Now, we've put a lot of meat on those bones, but there's a hidden chapter in there you will just be amazed by. All right, that's a little side note. Okay, but the real question is this. If the stars are telling the story of God, is it really true? Are they really telling the story of God? Is there scriptural evidence? Is the Bible saying that God's, the way he put the stars up there, really say the same thing that God's word is saying? And I will say the answer to that is yes. And so the constellations do tell God's story. Now, we know that there wasn't any written word. There was no writing, really. There wasn't writing in mankind for about 2,500 years after creation. So for those 2,500 years, God still had a story to tell. I mean, ever since the fall of Adam and Eve back in Genesis chapter 3, God has told the story of the Redeemer. So that story was out there. But if there was no written communication, how did God communicate that story? So if there was no written word, was there no word from God? So did he have other means of communicating his word other than written word? Well, Romans chapter 10, verse 17 says, so then trust comes from hearing, and hearing by the message, the rhema of Christ. Now that word rhema is a Greek word, New Testament, and that word rhema means communication from God by way of word, message, or instruction. And that's how I normally always took rhema, that it had to be something written down. But if you look at it more closely, it's also communication from God by thing, by object, by matter, some matter going on, some event, or event. And so God not only communicates by way of writing, but he communicates by things, by objects, by matter, or by event. And I make this point by showing you this. So this is Luke chapter 2. This is the birth of Yeshua, the birth of Jesus. His Hebrew name is Yeshua. And this is from Luke chapter 2. This is the shepherds. The angels had just come to the shepherds and said, look, the Messiah has been born. You should go see him. It's an amazing thing. And here the word rhema is used to talk about an event. So it says in Luke chapter 2, let's go straight to Bethlehem and see this thing, this event, this rhema. So this was a communication from God that has happened by which the Lord has made known to us. So this was not something written down. This was an event. This was the birth of the Messiah. And from that birth, we can get communication from God. We can get instruction from God. So it's not just written words. It is things going on around us as well. So it's not only his written word, it's all the things he's created as well. It's all his stories in the Old Testament. The stories of the Old Testament, the historical events, all communicate attributes and prophetic insight about the coming of the Messiah. And so look at Romans chapter 1. And Romans chapter 1 verses 19 and 20 says this, because of what can be known about God is plain to them, for God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature are clearly seen, being understood through the things he has made, so that they are without excuse. So here it is saying that through the things that God has created, the trees, the earth, the stars, us, he's communicating things about the way he is. He's showing us his symmetry. He's showing us prophetic things about the future. Now, often we just don't get it, but he is saying we are without excuse not to know there's a God by the complexity and the amazing things that go on around us. So his rhema is always before us. His instruction, his teaching is all around us. And if we just open our eyes to see it, we will know our God more and more. I mean, God is there to be known. He wants us to be known. He wants us to know him. He wants to be our Father. He wants to be our loving, Heavenly Father. And he wants us as his children. And so he's showing us himself every single day, not only through his word, but all the things going on around us. And so back to Romans chapter 10, the next verse, verse 18 says, but I say, so we know that, truth comes by hearing. And it says, but I say, did they not hear? Indeed, they have. Their voice went out to all the earth, and their words, again, the word remata, words plural, to the ends of the inhabited world. So whose voice is Paul talking about? Their voice. Who is the there? And what is their message? And what is the instruction? Who is it that God is, or that Paul is writing about? And to get the answer to this, we have to go where this quote is from, and that's Psalm 19. So Psalm 19 is our next stop. So the answer to whose voice, the answer to what message, and the answer to what instruction all comes from Psalm 19. So this unique psalm is the key to directly comparing the stars in the heavens and the lights in the heavens, really, all the planets, all the stars, the sun and the moon, to what is written in God's word. So when people say God's word is written in the stars, this is the key. This is the pin that pins the two together, the written word and the heavenly word. And really, we could spend the next day or weekend talking about Psalm 19. That's how intimately complex this psalm is. And if you have the Witness of the Stars, and if you have the Bollinger Bible, if you have his book on Revelation, he goes into Psalm 19 and all those areas and really spends a lot more time on it than I'm going to spend today. But I'm just going to give you the barest outline of Psalm 19 and how the stars and the written word fit together. So the first 6 verses of Psalm 19 talk about the heavens. The rest of it talks about the scriptures. And so there it is. The introduction is in the heavens. The follow-up is the scriptures. But it's much more complex than that. And it's so complex that you really can't miss it. And so we're just going to read it, and then I'm going to show you the keys on how it really is woven together very complexly. So verse 1 says, the heavens declare, or some versions say, are telling the glory of God. Some versions, other versions of the Bible, just to make it more clear, make that word more clear. So the heavens declare, or are telling, present tense, the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. The heavens uttering speech, they're showing knowledge. There is no speech nor language. Their voice is not heard. And Bollinger renders this, and without being audible is their voice. So we know the stars are not speaking in an audible voice, but yet their voice is being heard. Not audibly, but, without being audible is their voice. So there is no speech nor language. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth. So every night, every part of the earth can see the sky. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words, their sayings, to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle, which is a tent or a dwelling place, for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Now the chamber is the chuppah, which is the wedding canopy. Every Jewish wedding, the bride and groom get under a little tent. They put a little tent over their head to represent God's protection. So the bridegroom comes out of his chamber, out of his chuppah, out of his wedding canopy, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. And so these are obvious pictures of the Messiah. I mean, there's no question here. He's talking about the Messiah. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. That is, there's nothing hid from him, the Messiah. The law, and so now it switches to the Bible. So those 6 verses are all about the heavens. Now it's correlating that with the Bible. For the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned. and in keeping of them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Well, now think about this. So those last verses I just read, the law of the Lord is perfect, the statutes of the Lord are right, the fear of the Lord is clean, more desired are they than gold, by them as thy servant warned, who can understand his errors? All those things you have always thought those are his written words. But now keep in mind what I'm saying here. We're being warned by the stars. The stars are perfect. The stars are right. By looking at the stars, they should be rejoicing our heart. The commandment, the stars are pure. They are enlightening our eyes. The fear of the Lord communicating by the stars are clean. His judgments, as told in the heavens, are pure and righteous altogether. What we learn from the stars should be more desired than gold, yea, than much fine gold. By them, we're warned. Thy servant is warned. By the stars, we should be seeing what's going on there and being warned. The same way we're being warned by what's written in the Word. So this is just amazing. So now here we begin the complexity between the first half of this psalm and the second half of the psalm. The first 4 lines, so verses 1 through the first part of verse 4 are 8 lines, which talk about the heavens. The next part and these 2 parts A and part B are still talking about the heavens, verses 1 through 6. So the first 8 lines talk about the heavens. The next 6 lines talk about in them is the sun. The second section also consists of 2 parts. 8 lines are about the scriptures. The second part of the second half are 6 lines, and in them thy servant is warned. It talks about the servant, so exact mirroring, mirroring of the way it's broken down are mirrored between the first and second half. Each half, the first half about the stars, the second half about the scriptures, are 14 lines each, exactly, no more, no less. This is the amazing part and really what you could spend a long time on. In the first half, which is the astronomical half, there are 9 terms that are literary terms that are used only in literature, okay? And you can go back and look, there's 9 words that are used in the first half that are literary terms. And in the second half, which is the literary half, talking about the scriptures, there are 9 words that are only used to describe astronomical events, and yet God uses them to describe his scriptures. So look at the weaving. Look at how he's taken astronomical terms and literary terms and put them together so that in the astronomical half, there's literary terms used. In the literary half, there's astronomical terms used. I mean, God is going out of his way to weave together what's going on in the stars and what's going on in the heavens. Now, this is the part that I think we really need to pay attention to. So how many of you love geometry? I don't. I hated geometry. Geometry was all about proofs and, if this, then that. And I just did not get it a lot of times. I should really go back now when I have a little more wisdom, and probably I would really understand I don't love geometry, but maybe I would understand it. I don't know. But this is an if-then statement that I'm about to give you. So if the heavens are indeed the equivalent to the written word, and we are told to, this is from 2 Timothy chapter 2, make a diligent effort to present yourself approved before God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth. So if we are told to be diligent with the written word, then, here's the then part of the statement, doesn't it follow logically that we should make the same diligent effort to rightly handle the heavens of truth as well? The same detail, the same depth, the same time, the same reason you can go to the written scriptures, no matter your frame of mind, no matter what your time of life is, and get more out of it, we should be able to look up into the heavens and say, wow, I didn't see that yesterday. Wow, I didn't get that yesterday. Wow, that is amazing. I'm really seeing that now. And I believe this is all true, because I believe the more we dig into the stars, we will see it like when we dig into the Word. The complexity of what God has to say is the same in the heavens as it is on the earth. Now, obviously, we're better at reading English or even Hebrew or Greek. I mean, not that I'm that good in Hebrew or Greek, but people are. We need to get that good looking up into the sky and going, holy cats, look at that. I never saw that before. And I think we're getting there. I think that's all about how information is increasing in these end times, that we're looking up in the sky and going, man, there it is. Just like we always knew it would be there, there it is. So that's what we're after today. So let's conclude our thinking about the first calendar. So God created the universe to tell his story. That it's to give us information about the signs, the appointed times, the seasons, the things to come. Actually, I have that backward. The signs are the things to come. The seasons are the appointed times. Or maybe I have that backwards. But it's also to give us prophetic insight about his plans. In the same way the Magi looked up into the sky and went, that's the sign. Let's go see the Messiah. We're going to be able to look up in the sky and go, this is the sign. He's coming back soon. And I believe that's exactly what's going on in the sky right now. So this is the other thing, is God's clock continues to tick every single day. And we have to get good about how to tell God's time. We have to be able to look up in the sky and go, oh my gosh, look how close we are to this event or that event, because that clock is still ticking. In the same way it heralded, I believe, the creation, the same way I believe it heralded the birth of Jesus Christ, the same way it heralded, the Magi to go and, see him. It is now, telling us what's going to go on in the future. All right, so let's talk about the second calendar, and this is the biblical feasts of Yahweh. And these really can be called the sacred seasons. So we have the seasons of the year, fall, spring, summer, winter. But we also have God's sacred feast days. And these are expounded in Exodus chapter 12, in Leviticus 23, Numbers 28, Deuteronomy 16. And these are called convocations or assemblies. And that the Hebrew word is mikra. And mikra means something called out, like a people called out or a people called out for an event. It's a public meeting, is a mikra. It's a rehearsal, and I'm going to call it a dress rehearsal, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It's also translated convocation in certain versions of the Old Testament. It's also translated assembly. And I'm going to show you the key words that go with each of these feast days. And once you get the key words down, you will begin to see these feasts all over the Old Testament and all over the New Testament. And they're everywhere. We look at the Bible from a Gentile perspective. We have not really spent much time thinking about the feasts of God. But once you see the key words that go with each feast, when you see those key words, like it talks about joy in tabernacles, when you see, when it talks about joy in the Old Testament, joy in the New Testament, your mind should immediately go, oh my gosh, these are key words that have to do with the Feast of Tabernacles. And as you begin to think, well, what is the Feast of Tabernacles all about? It begins to put a lot more meat on the bones of whatever it is you're reading at that moment. So you're going to see them everywhere after you start to learn more about the feast. Right now, we just see it in Exodus, we see it in Leviticus, we see it in Numbers, we see it in Deuteronomy, but we don't see it really anywhere else. But they're everywhere. These feasts are literally everywhere in the Bible. All right, so these are God's dress rehearsals. God gave us these feasts, just the way he gave us the stars. God gave us these feasts to prophetically see his plan for the redemption of mankind. And once you begin to see these feasts, you will begin to see God's dress rehearsals and God's plan for redeeming us everywhere. Okay, so the feasts are broken into really two groups. There's 4 spring feasts, and those had to do with Messiah's first coming. So it was Passover, which was all about freedom from slavery when the children of Israel left Egypt. There's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is when we were cleansed, or, it's all about cleansing from sin. And this would have been when they went into the Red Sea and they were literally buried by the Red Sea. This was the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This was a picture of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then first fruits was all about resurrection. And what do you want to bet? When the children of Israel came out of the other side of the Red Sea, what day do you want to, what day do you think that was? I will bet that was the day of first fruits. They came out of the Red Sea as the first fruits of God's new people. The children of Israel came out from being buried in the Red Sea, not literally, but figuratively. I mean, literally, they were under the waves because the waves were raised on them, around them on each side. And they came out on the day of first fruits. You want to bet that's true? The symmetry of God makes that an absolute. I guarantee that was the day they came out, was the day of first fruits in that year. And then Pentecost was all about gifts from heaven. Pentecost was when they showed up at Mount Sinai, or wherever it was. Many people believe it was Mount Sinai. And God spoke and gave his written Torah. That was the day of Pentecost. There's no question about that. It's all about, we'll talk about the key words here in a minute. But Pentecost was all about gifts from heaven. The word, the Torah came from God, came from heaven. It was the gift from heaven. And so the four spring feasts showed the pattern, not only of what God was doing at that time, but looking back, we can say what God did in the past, but also it's going to show us things about the future. And then there's 3 fall feasts. And these are all about the second coming of Messiah. Now, nothing prophetic has happened on these feasts yet, but these feasts, when given to Israel back in the Old Testament, Rosh Hashanah was all about awake. This was the first day of the civil calendar, so the so-called Jewish New Year. The themes of Rosh Hashanah were all about awake, waking from the dead especially, so resurrection was all about trumpet blowing. Yom Kippur was a very solemn day. Day of Atonement was all about mourning. It was all about being sad and getting your life together with God. And Tabernacles was at the time of the harvest and was all about joy. It was all about harvest, was all about, the celebration, was all about joy. So the spring feasts, the ones that have been fulfilled already by Yeshua, by Jesus, were fulfilled on the very day and the very time and in the exact order that they were given by God. So Jesus' death and resurrection filled the first 3. So he was selected on Nisan the 10th. That's when the Passover lamb was God told people to select the Passover lamb on Nisan, on the 10th of Nisan. Jesus, rode into Jerusalem on Nisan 10, and the people, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. It was all about, they chose him as whether they were, actively recognize it or not, he was being chosen as the Passover lamb for all time. So he was chosen on the right day. He died at the right day, the right place, at the right time. On Nisan 14, it's called between the evenings, which would have been about 3 p.m. He died, was crucified as the Passover lamb. If you look in the Old Testament, not a bone of his body was broken. You weren't supposed to break any bones of the Passover lamb. I mean, just all he's supposed to be, a male of the first year out of the flock of Israel. You can look into all that in detail. It was all fulfilled exactly as prophesied about Jesus Christ. He was in the ground during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, just the same way, in that feast, sin is supposed to be buried during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He got up from the dead on the day of first fruits. He presented himself in the Holy of Holies as the first fruits, as the resurrection from the dead. He went into the Holy of Holies, talks about how the temple was torn, showing, the access now that we have to the Holy of Holies through Jesus Christ. It's God in Christ in us. We are the Holy of Holies now everywhere we go. And so in the Passover, the unleavened bread and the first fruits, we have freedom from slavery. We have freedom from physical slavery. We have freedom from mental slavery, and we have freedom from spiritual slavery. The devil was defeated in our lives when we make Jesus our Lord, make him our boss. We are no longer owned or, belong to Satan, and we have freedom through the resurrection and life of Jesus Christ. So those are the first 3. And then the fourth spring feast was Pentecost. So 50 days after Jesus was raised from the dead was the Feast of Pentecost. It's 50 days after Passover. And this was to commemorate so first fruits was the first fruits of the barley harvest. Pentecost was the first fruits of the wheat harvest. It's all about us. It was all about the birth of the church, of the body of Christ. And it's still about gifts from heaven. But instead of the Torah, now the gift from heaven on the day of Pentecost, right after Jesus was was taken in heaven, was Holy Spirit. It was all about tongues of fire. Fire is an attribute of Pentecost, because when God came and gave the Torah, it talks about there was fire on the mountain, and the voice came from heaven. In the book of Acts, it was the voice of a mighty rushing wind. They heard that voice, that sound from heaven, and there was tongues of fire, and then they all spoke in tongues. The Holy Spirit was given to us to be on the inside of us for the first time. And so it was, the birth of the church of Christ. And this is the time we're in now. So we're right now in the long summer of the Church of Grace. So Pentecost was really the beginning of the summer. And for 2,000 years now, nothing has happened with the fall feasts. So on that Pentecost in, 30 AD or whenever it was, we started the Church of the Body of Christ. And now we're in the long pause. The pause button has been hit on God's timetable. And we are the Church of Grace. But there is coming the fall feasts, and they're going to be fulfilled the same way the first ones were. The spring feasts were filled in a certain way. The fall feasts are going to be filled in the same way. So let's take a look at the three fall feasts. The first one is Rosh Hashanah, and that's Tishri 1. That's always in the fall. That's the Jewish calendar is very fluid. It runs on lunar months, so it's not like our solar calendar, which is run on the sun. So lunar months is 28 days to a month instead of our 30 to, we have 28 days in February, but most of our months are 30 or 31 days. And so the months of the Hebrew and the Gentile calendar are a little bit flexible. But Tishri 1 generally is sometime in mid-September to mid-October, so in the fall. And the themes of Rosh Hashanah are all about awakening from the dead. So it's resurrection. It's all about trumpet blasts. The last trumpet, so the shofar, which is a ram's horn, I don't know if you've ever seen a ram's horn trumpet, but ram's horn, there's two kinds of trumpets in Israel. There was a silver trumpet, which is a different Hebrew word, and the shofar, which was a ram's horn. Literally, the horn from a ram was cut off from the ram, was hollowed out, and was blown into to make, a trumpet sound. And the trumpets were blown on Rosh Hashanah, I'm told, about 100 times. And the last trumpet, which was blown at sunset at the end of the feast of Rosh Hashanah, was called the last trump. And so it was a 2-day feast. It's the only feast it's the only feast that has that pattern. It was done over 2 days. We'll talk about why that was in a minute. But the other attribute of the Rosh Hashanah was that the door or the gate of heaven and the book of life stood open. So the door of heaven was open on Rosh Hashanah, or the door or gate of heaven. It's used different ways in the Bible. And the book of life was open on Rosh Hashanah. The other two attributes of Rosh Hashanah was it had, in the liturgy of the Feast of Rosh Hashanah, which is the verses that were read, was all about the king, the coronation of king. And they would have said, King God. God was the king in the Old Testament. But we would look at that now and say, it's the king, the Messiah. That's the king. That's really the attribute of Rosh Hashanah. And the other attribute of Rosh Hashanah was the wedding feast. The liturgy of weddings often comes from the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah. And now we would look at that and go, oh my gosh, the wedding feast of the Messiah is really the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah. So we're already beginning to see the prophetic pictures in the feast of Rosh Hashanah. Now, the reason that Rosh Hashanah is considered a 2-day feast is this. Rosh Hashanah has many names. It's called Yom Teruah, the Feast of Blowing, the Feast of Trumpet Blast, the Feast of Resurrection. It has Hebrew words for all those attributes. But one of the names of Rosh Hashanah is this, and that is the hidden day, or the hidden feast, or the unknown day. There's Hebrew words for Rosh Hashanah that mean those things. And the reason Rosh Hashanah is called the hidden day is because it's the only feast that God gave that occurs on the first day of the month. Now, what did I tell you already? What happens on the first day of a month? The first day of the month is the new moon. Well, you can't see a new moon. Literally, the description of a new moon is it's new. It is in the sky in such a way that it's completely in shadow from the earth. So the earth is totally, or the moon is totally in shadow from the earth. You can't see it unless you're really paying attention, which most of the times we're not. But what they do is they watch for the new moon, and then the next day is the faintest sliver of the moon. And that actually was the way you told when the month began. You had to have two witnesses. This is all in the law of the Old Testament. You had to have two witnesses. They had to see a sliver of the moon. They then went to the Sanhedrin and said, we saw the sliver of the moon. It's time to blow the trumpet that indicates a new month. The first day of every new month, they blew a trumpet. Well, on Rosh Hashanah, which happened on the first day of a month, you did not know when that day was going to occur until they saw the sliver of the moon. Two witnesses had to go out and see the sliver. They go to the Sanhedrin, and then they would have said, you know what? Rosh Hashanah started today. Blow the trumpet. And until it wasn't. And until they saw that new moon, the sliver after the new moon, they did not know the day or the hour of Rosh Hashanah. Sound familiar? So it was the hidden day. It was the hidden feast, because until you saw that sliver, you did not know the day and hour of the new moon. And it wasn't until it was. So interesting that, not knowing the day or hour, does that sound like it might come up again? I think it might. So let's look at some of the verses that are used from the Old Testament and actually the New Testament, the pictures in the New Testament now of Rosh Hashanah. So this is from Psalm 24. It says, lift up your heads, O you gates. Gates, remember, listen for the themes. Gates being open, all about the king, all about the wedding. Listen for those, trumpet blowing. Listen for those key words as I'm reading the verses now that were used in the liturgy to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And we'll see that's true for the other feasts as well. So that's why I say the feasts are everywhere. You just have not noticed it. So here we go. So lift up your heads. Well, when are our heads really going to be lifted up? When we're resurrected from the dead. You talk about lifting up your heads. That's going to be an amazing time. The dead in Christ will rise. We who are alive will be caught up together with them. You talk about lifting up your heads. So lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors. Again, the doors. And the King of glory shall come in. This is all Rosh Hashanah. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Now, they were thinking about King God, King Yahweh. But we know now this is a prophetic picture of our Messiah, and he's going to come in glory. He's the one who's going to lift up our heads. So verse 9, lift up your heads, O ye gates, lift them up, ye everlasting doors, the doors of heaven, and ye King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? Yeah, we know who he is now, don't we? The Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. The word host means armies. He is the King of glory, Selah. Now look at Psalm 118. Open to me the gates of righteousness. Well, when will the gates really be open to us? When we go through them after we're raised from the dead, or if we're still alive when we go up on the resurrection. The gates are going to be open to us. I will go into them. I will praise the Lord. This gate of the Lord into which the righteous shall enter. You know what? It's the righteous who are going to enter the gates of the Lord. Okay, look at 1 Corinthians. Now we're beginning to see all the pattern in the New Testament. In a moment, in the blink of an eye, at the last trump. Now, where did I just say we were going to, the last shofar being blown at the end of Rosh Hashanah is called the last trump. So in the blink of an eye, at the last trump. Now, does this mean we're going to go when the last trump sounds? I don't know. I'm just reading it to you. I'm not making it up here. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Same phraseology as Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah is the next feast that's yet to be fulfilled. So interesting? I think so. So this is repeated again in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a loud command, the shout of the Lord, and the voice of a ruling angel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. So again, the patterns are repeating. So Rosh Hashanah is a picture, I believe, of the gathering together. Now, if you want to get a more amazing picture of Rosh Hashanah, I believe it's been under our nose the whole time. And I believe there's an exact description of the day we will go up in the book of Revelation. And it's Revelation chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, and it says this. And after these things I saw, and look, a door that had been opened in heaven, again, open doors, and the first voice, which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, again, trumpets, said, come up here. And what do you think we're going to hear when we hear the loud command of God? I think it's going to be, come up here. I think those are the exact words we're going to hear. And it continues. It says, and I will show you the things that must come to pass after this. And immediately, in the blink of an eye, I was in the Spirit, and look, a throne was set in heaven, and someone sitting on the throne. Again, a door open, a trumpet, come up here. Immediately, a king on his throne. All about the king, all about the throne, the coronation of the king. I mean, I don't know how you could get it more completely tied together than that. I mean, it's just unbelievable. All right, so here's the question we need to answer. So what about the whole, you're not supposed to know the day or hour thing? Because that's going to get thrown in your face when you talk about this. And I'll say right off the bat, I do not know the day or hour. I do not know the exact time we're going to go. And even looking at the pattern of the stars, I can't tell you. But I will tell you this, there's a pattern that can't be ignored. So maybe we don't know the day or hour, but here's part of the argument you can say when people say, well, you can't be right because we don't know the day or hour. So first of all, there's the whole new moon thing I just told you about. The feast of Rosh Hashanah is called the hidden day. We won't know the day or hour Rosh Hashanah begins, but once it begins, we know it has begun. So the day is hidden until we see that sliver of the moon and the trumpet is blown saying Rosh Hashanah has begun. And so we won't know the day or hour until it begins. And then you know what? We're going to know the season that we're in. So we don't know because of the new moon thing. But now we live, remember we talked about in Daniel, information is going to be increased. We now live in a world where there's 24 different time zones. And we have an international date line. There's actually 2 days on Earth at any one time. Now there's like a second where there's only 1 day on Earth when you have, the second before you get to the next day at the international date line. But for most days on Earth, there's actually 2 days on Earth. There's, yesterday and today, or today and tomorrow, based on the international date line. Well, in Jesus' day, they didn't have time zones. They didn't have, Eastern Daylight Standard Time, and they didn't change their clocks like we're going to do later this fall. They didn't have any of that. They had one time zone. And whatever the sun was telling them, it was the 6th hour, the 9th hour, whatever. But it's not like that anymore. Now we have 24 time zones. And so you have to say, well, we don't know the day or hour because what day are we looking for? What sunset are we looking for when the last trump is blown? What sliver of the moon are we looking for when Rosh Hashanah starts? Is it Jerusalem? Could be, but it might not be. But here's the thing about the day and hour. So this is from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 and 4. I'm going to read you verse 1 first. It says, but this is Paul writing to the Thessalonians. It says, but concerning the times and dates, brothers, you have no need that anything be written to you. For you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. So now you read that and you go, all right, so we won't know the day or hour. Paul is saying the Lord's going to come like a thief in the night, and we just aren't going to know. That's the argument of these people who say you won't know the day or the hour, because even Paul says he's going to come like a thief in the night. But if you think that, you're not paying attention, because look at verse 4. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, that that day would overtake you like a thief. And I believe that day he's talking about is a Rosh Hashanah in the future when we're going to go. Because if you look in 1 Thessalonians, that's the whole theme, is about our resurrection from the dead on some future feast day, which I believe is Rosh Hashanah. So look, he is saying the exact opposite of the people who say you won't know the day or hour. Now, he's not saying you're going to know the exact day or hour, but he's saying you're going to know when the time is getting close. That's what I believe he's saying. So he's saying, but you brothers are not in darkness. You know the seasons. You are paying attention. You are seeing this so that the Lord is not going to come like a thief in the night to you. And so I believe the paraphrase of what Paul is saying is this: you have no need that I tell you what's going on. And that's what he's saying in verse 1. You have no need that anything be written to you. You have no need to tell you what's going on because you know already. I've been with you. I've been teaching you. This is what Paul is saying to the Thessalonians. Now, why don't we let Jesus weigh in about not knowing the day or hour? Because I believe Jesus is saying the exact same thing that Paul's saying, or I should say, Paul's saying what Jesus has said already. And Jesus said the opposite of not knowing. Jesus is saying you need to know what's going around you. You should be aware of the times and the seasons. And you get that, actually Jesus says that many times. I'm just going to show you 2 times he said it. So this is when Jesus is coming into Jerusalem. This is at the time of the end. He knows he's going to die. He's going to offer up his life as a sacrifice for many. And he says this. So this is Luke 19. It says, and when he drew near and saw the city, he burst into sobs over it. It says wept. Literally, that word wept means he bursts into sobs over Jerusalem, saying, if you had known on this day. And then later in the verse 44, it says, and they will not leave in you one stone standing upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Jesus is saying you should have known that I was coming. But the signs that I'm doing, the prophecies about me, you guys should have been a lot more aware than what you really are. And instead of, seeing that I'm not the Messiah, you should have known that the day of your visitation was upon you. And look at in Matthew chapter 16, Jesus says to the Pharisees, oh, you hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the heavens. And some people say you know how to discern the weather. It's translated like that. But you are not able to discern the signs of the time. So again, Jesus is saying that we rather than not knowing the day and hour, we should be aware of what's going on around us. So again, I'm not saying we're going to know the day or hour, because I don't believe we're going to know the exact day or hour, but I think we can pay attention to the things going on around us and the prophetic signs, not only in his word, not only in these feast days, but in the heavens as well. And we're going to see there's a lot of interesting patterns going on. Okay, so that's Rosh Hashanah. Let's look at the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur is the second fall feast. But there's an interesting interim between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And there's a 7-day period. So Rosh Hashanah is the first of Tishri. It's a 2-day feast, so the first and second of Tishri. Then there's 7 days before Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur starts on the 10th. So the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th of Tishri are the 7 days of awe. So the period between the end of Rosh Hashanah, the sunset on Rosh Hashanah, to sunset on Yom Kippur, remember their days start on sunset, there's 7 24-hour periods called the days of awe. Now, I'm not making this up. This is, you can check this out. This is nothing. What I'm saying to you about the feast days and the stars, none of this is new. This has all been there. You can find all this information. I'm not making it up. At least I hope I'm not making it up. There's always a chance I've got it wrong. But I pray that God covers if I do get something wrong. But these days of awe are an intense time of repentance. So remember I told you that the doors of heaven are open on Rosh Hashanah. The book of life is open on Rosh Hashanah. You have these 7 days when the doors are still open. The book of life is still open. And you have these 7 days to examine your life and repent and change your heart and your life for God. Because on Rosh Hashanah, the doors of heaven are going to close. The book of life is going to close. And if you've not made a decision for Messiah, you've missed out. And now in the Jewish mind, they would say you missed out for that year. But I'm going to show you you're missing out is a much bigger time period than just that year involved. Okay, so Yom Kippur. It's called the Day of Atonement. It's Tishri 10. The themes of Yom Kippur are mourning, not AM mourning like when the sun rises, but mourning as if, mourning someone who died. So it's mourning. It's a very solemn feast. It's the most solemn feast of the year. And it's called a feast, but it's all about fasting. You don't eat on Yom Kippur. So it's all about fasting, but it's called the Feast of the Lord just because it is an appointed time. It is a dress rehearsal. That's where that word feast comes from. The appointed time, the season of the year, the dress rehearsal of God. It's all about atonement for sin. The door or gate of heaven and the book of life close on Yom Kippur. So you are sealed in your fate on Yom Kippur. If you have not decided for Messiah on Yom Kippur, you're going to be judged on where you are at that moment. And the sentence is carried out on Yom Kippur. So you're judged whether you're in the book of life or not in the book of life, and your sentence is carried out on Yom Kippur. So atonement, I love the way that means is at one-ment. We're once again restored to fellowship with God on Rosh Hashanah. So we're made at one again. We are one with God again on Rosh Hashanah. So we're redeemed from our sin. We're redeemed from the ownership of the evil one. And it's an interesting picture because on Rosh Hashanah it says we are again able to be face to face with God. That's the picture of Yom Kippur. We can once again, if we're judged to be, our names are written in the book of life, we are returned to be face to face with God once again. So let's read some of the liturgy from Yom Kippur and see if any of these things ring true or strike a familiar note with you. So this is from Hosea chapter 5 and 6. It says, I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense. So this is written from the perspective of God. I will go and return to my place. And who's returned to his place right now and making a place for us but Messiah? Till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. If people don't seek the Lord's face and get born again, they're going to miss this. So I'm going to return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, they will seek me early. Now, the picture changes in chapter 6, verse 1. Now it's the people talking, and it says, come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. Now think of the picture of the children of Israel. He hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. Now look at verse 2. It's almost unbelievable. After 2 days, he will revive us. In the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Now keep in mind that with the Lord, 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is as 1,000 years. After 2 days, or after 2,000 years, who was restored to their land? Who was restored to the rightful place in the earthly kingdoms but Israel? So for 2,000 years, there was no nation of Israel. And it says, after 2 days, he will revive us. Well, what's the third day? The third day is the next millennium. And what's going to happen in the next millennium, the millennial kingdom? It says, on the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. I mean, what is that but an unbelievable prophetic picture of what's happened in the last 2,000 years and what's about to happen in the millennial kingdom. And it's been right under the nose of all of us all along. And look at verse 3. This is another amazing picture to show us what we're understanding more and more right now. It says, then we shall know if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and the former rain unto the earth. And what you'll see as you learn about these feasts is it talks about them like the latter and the former rain. The former rain were the spring feast. That's when they prayed for rain. A lot of these feasts were praying for rain so that the crops would grow. They were a very agricultural society. They didn't have supermarkets. They didn't have places where they could go to get vegetables. If they didn't get the rain in the spring and they didn't get the rain in the fall, they would perish. They'd be in difficult times. So the spring feasts And this fall feasts were all about praying for rain, all about honoring God, all about obeying God so they would get the rain for their crops. So the former rain, the spring rains, is all about the spring feasts. The latter rain is all about the fall feasts. And who are the pictures of the spring and fall feasts but the first coming of Messiah and the second coming of Messiah? So it says, verse 3, and we shall know if we follow on to know the Lord. Well, how are we going to know the Lord? Is to get these feasts down and see the pictures that are there in such amazing detail about what he's done, what he's doing, and what he's going to do. And they're just like the former and the latter rain. And so the pictures of this is just amazing. All right, so look at Zechariah chapter 12. Again, Yom Kippur, mourning, fasting. Look at this. It says, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. In that day there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, and the land shall mourn. Well, I mean, so this is all about the first coming of Messiah. They will look on him whom they've pierced. And it's all about the second coming of Messiah. For they shall see him, where am I now? For they shall mourn for him as one who mourns for his only son. They're going to get that the Messiah was the Son of God and that he came to set us free. All the earth is going to get that, when Jesus comes the second time. So yes, there was mourning. Yes, he was pierced the first time when he died, 2,000 years ago. But the picture is also about his second coming as well. And there will be great mourning in all Jerusalem. They didn't really mourn for him when he died the first time. But when he comes the second time, we're going to get it. And there will be great mourning for him in the future. All right, so look at this, Isaiah 25. It says, now this is all liturgy from Yom Kippur. But look at the pictures that are being shown here. And he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people. Now, what is the face of the covering cast over on people? And the veil that is spread over all nations. Well, what's the veil spread over all nations? The curse that we deal with now, but death. Look at the next verse. He will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord will wipe away the tears from off all the faces, and the rebuke of his people shall he take away from off all the earth, for the Lord has spoken it. Now, guaranteed, this has not happened. So this is a future picture. When on a future Yom Kippur, death will be swallowed up and victory will be over the whole earth. And it shall be said in that day, what day is that? We'll see. It shall be in that day, lo, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him, and we will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. So look at this one. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. What's the theme? But when this corruptible puts on incorruptibility, and this mortal puts on immortality, then the word that has been written, well, we just read it. This is the word that has been written. This is Isaiah 25. This is where it comes from. Then the word that has been written will be brought to pass. So it hasn't come to pass yet. Death has been swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? This is Yom Kippur phraseology. This is talking about a future Yom Kippur. When we get resurrected on a Rosh Hashanah, guess what? Death is still going to be on earth. Death is not going to be done away with during the tribulation period. Death is going to be done away with on a future Yom Kippur. So we're going to see that. Okay, so again, so now this is interesting. This is 1 Corinthians 13. We see this face-to-face verse, and we've read it and thought about, some nebulous thinking about what face-to-face meant. We now know this is a picture of Yom Kippur. It says, for now we see in a mirror darkly, but then face-to-face. Yom Kippur is all about sins being dealt with, repentance of sin, coming to Messiah, and being once again in alignment, at one with God, and we can see him and know him face to face. It says, now I know only in part, but then I will know fully, even also even as also I was fully known. Now, for us who are resurrected in Rosh Hashanah, at that moment, we're going to see him face to face, and we will know him even as we are known. But for the people on earth and the final fulfillment of everyone seeing face to face God, that's not going to happen until a future Rosh Hashanah, or future Yom Kippur. So this is Yom Kippur phraseology in 1 Corinthians 13, which is all about love. And we just have not seen the sprinkling of these feasts everywhere through the Old and New Testament. So it's really pretty amazing stuff. Okay. So
Hey, Gary?
Yes.
We had a question from Eli. He was curious about your thoughts about whether or not there's 7 feasts, and we know they're roughly about 4,000 years up to the Messiah, and then there's been 2,000 years since then, and then the Bible talks about an additional 1,000 years, and whether or not you think that the feasts themselves reference those 7,000 years. So the first 4 fulfilled at the end of the first 4,000, the next 2 fulfilled at the end of the 2,000, and the last one beginning the last 1,000, something along those lines.
Right. Well, all right, so this is a sidelight. I do believe there are 7,000 years to this time of life that we know. So I believe creation occurred 4,000 or 6,000 years ago. So from creation to Christ was 4,000 years. From Christ to us, which is this window we're in now, the church of the body of Christ, is 2,000 years. And then there'll be 1,000 years after that, the millennial kingdom, that does add up to 7,000 years. The pattern clear is the 7 days of creation. And I believe there is some sort of correlation between each day of creation and something that happened in the corresponding millennium of the first day, first millennium, second day, second millennium. I mean, it's kind of beyond where my brain has gone so far. I've been looking for that, but I've not seen it clearly. And the reason I know that has to be true is because in the 7th day of creation, what did God do? He rested. In the 7th millennium, what are we going to do? The earth will be at rest. The earth will be at peace. Crops will be unbelievably abundant. There'll be no war. There'll be justice. There still will be crime. There still will be death. But a Messiah is going to rule that will be absolute, a millennial time of Sabbath. The Sabbath day of rest, it'll be a millennium of rest. And so because there is a correlation between that 7th day and the 7th millennium, the symmetry of God will dictate that there must have been something about the first millennium of time and the first day of creation. The second millennium of time, the second day of creation. I have no idea what that is. That is like beyond the scope of my understanding. But because I believe that symmetrical pattern is true, I believe it is also true that each feast day is a picture of that first day of creation and that corresponding millennium. And the reason that is true is because the 7th feast day, which we're about to talk about right now, is all about the millennial kingdom. The 7th feast is the picture of the millennial kingdom, is the picture of the 7th day of creation. They're absolutely correlated. There's no question about it. And so, yes, the answer to that is yes, it is true, but it is so much beyond what we understand right now. And the nuances of this run so deeply that I think we're not going to know until we get to heaven. And I believe, and I said this many times, some of you have heard me say this, I believe when we get to heaven, we're all going to have red dots on our foreheads, not because we're Hindu, but because we're going to go around going, "Duh, I should have known that. Duh, I should have known that." And we're all going to have calluses on our forehead for how many times we hit ourselves in the forehead, because the intricacies of what we should have known, even the outside world around us, and the patterns in a tree, the patterns in the grass, the patterns in the wind, the patterns in the rain are so amazingly detailed about God and about his Messiah especially, that we just did not get it. We just walked around with the blinders of our traditions, with the blinders of our 5 senses, that we just did not understand the greatness of what was going around. And like I say, even this teaching here today, we're barely scratching the surface. So yes, if you can think things like that, it is God tugging on your heartstrings, whatever the line of thinking you have, that there's something there, and you need to get out your Bibles and get out your concordance, get out your interlinears, get out your, whatever you need and start looking, because God is putting on your heart an attribute of this life and his giving of this life that only you are seeing, and you need to teach us what you're seeing, because this is just the beginning. And unfortunately, I think this beginning is going to be fairly short, because the end is near, I believe, and then we're going to know even as we're known, and we'll all start having our red dots in our foreheads. So, yes, good question, and it's absolutely true. All right, so let's talk about tabernacles. Tabernacles is 5 days after Yom Kippur, 15 days after Rosh Hashanah. So these three feast days occur within 2 weeks of each other. So they're all just like the first three of Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits occurred in 1 week. These next three occur in the next 2 weeks, or 2 weeks in Tishri. So the themes of tabernacles, and tabernacles is also called booths, and the Hebrew word for booths is sukkot, which just means booths. So this is all, so when people talk about tabernacles or booths or sukkot, this is all talking about the same feast. And let me just say this, next Sunday at this time, we're going to break down this feast even more. So I'm going to talk about booths even more than I'm talking about it now, because the depth of each one of these feasts is unbelievable. And we're going to look at joy and tabernacles in a much more detailed manner next Sunday at the same time. We'll put it out as a YouTube so you can get it just the same way you're getting this. Okay, so the themes of tabernacles are harvest, abundance. It's about God sending the fall rains. Remember I said the former feast, the spring feasts were all about the spring rains. The fall feasts are all about the fall rains. This is the biggest celebration of the year. This is the original Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving is based on tabernacle. So God gave a feast of Thanksgiving thousands of years before we caught on. So it's the biggest celebration of the year. The themes are joy and rejoicing. So wherever you see joy and rejoicing in the word, it's the pictures of tabernacles, which is the picture of the millennial kingdom. So this is just what we were talking about. It's a looking forward to God's permanent dwelling. What's a dwelling but a tabernacle? It's God's permanent dwelling with us in some future, not only the millennial kingdom, but what's beyond that as well. So it's all about joy. It's all about rejoicing. It's all about fall harvest. It's all about abundance. Those are all the pictures of tabernacles. Now, here's the most interesting picture of tabernacles, is that you're commanded by God to rejoice. So no pouty faces, no frowny faces, no sad emoticons. When you were in tabernacles, if you were not rejoicing, you were disobedient to God's commandment. So God commanded them, you will rejoice for these 7 days. So it's amazing. You not only should rejoice, you're commanded by God to rejoice. So here's a tabernacle. A tabernacle is a temporary booth for the most part. This is the picture from the Old Testament. It was temporary. It was a booth or a tent. Those were tabernacles. And the commemoration of tabernacles was Israel leaving Egypt. Remember, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. They had tents. The original tabernacle, the original temple of God, was a portable tabernacle. That was called the tabernacle. So they were all portable. It was all the commemorative picture of leaving Egypt. And these are so Leviticus 23, these are two of the verses that give the fundamental outline of tabernacles. It says, you shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths. So this is what they were supposed to do on the Feast of Tabernacles. That your generations, the future generations, may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So what is a tabernacle? What is a booth? What is a sukkot or a sukkah? This is a modern sukkah. Now this is this is the framework, how it's begun to be built. I'm going to show you another picture of the completed project in just a minute. So this is what happens. Every observant Jew does this every year for the Feast of Tabernacles. They're supposed to build a temporary booth in honor of the commemoration of Israel leaving Egypt. So God told them to do this. They still do this just in the same way. So a couple things you'll see about this. It's supposed to be flimsy. It not only looks flimsy, it's supposed to be flimsy, because sturdy walls and a sturdy roof, and actually even 4 walls. So you can look and see it's only supposed to have 3 walls. It's supposed to be flimsy. It's supposed to have a leaky roof. I'm honest, that's the way it's supposed to be, because the picture is God is our protection. God is our sufficiency, not the work of our hands. So it's meant to be flimsy, 3 walls, leaky roof, all that, because the commemorative picture is God is our protection, God is our efficiency. But you were supposed to make it beautiful. So the beautification of the sukkah, of the booth, shows our heart and love for God. So it's the obedience as we build it. The beautification of it is to show our heart and love for God. Well, let me ask now, where is our sukkah now? Where is our booth now? Where is our tabernacle now but us? So it's given by God. It's temporary. It's supposed to be flimsy because we are not our own protection. We are not our own sufficiency. God is. That's our realization. But we're supposed to beautify it for our love and our heart for God. So we beautify our bodies for God. And Grace, I'll let it slide what you guys were laughing about during the teaching in September. Okay, so let's look at some of the liturgy. And again, see if you see any patterns here. Let's look at some of the liturgy of tabernacles. So this is from Amos 9. It says, behold, the days coming. And you notice how many of these were prophetic back then, but they were still in the liturgy of the feast they were observing at the moment of time that they were reading these things. So, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper. Now remember, this is all about abundance. It's all about thanksgiving. It's all about the millennial kingdom when there will be much abundance of food and all that. So, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes, him that soweth seed. So there's so much abundance that the guys who've got to do plow the field under so they can plant the next year have to say, look, you guys got to go. The people that are treading grapes, there's so many grapes still in the field that when the sowers come to sow the new crop for next year, they have to say, look, you guys got to leave. We got to plant here for next year. I know there's still abundance, that there's still stuff coming in from the harvest, but we got to draw the line somewhere. So verse 13 still, it says, then the mountains shall drop with sweet wine, and the hills shall melt, literally melt with harvest is the picture there. The hills will melt with harvest. Verse 14, and I will bring again the captivity, means I will release the captivity, or I'll get rid of the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. Now what's going on right now? But a lot of waste cities in Jerusalem, things that were desolate over time, ancient cities, are being rebuilt and lived in by the Jewish people. It says, and they shall rebuild the waste cities, rebuild technically if they're waste cities, you're rebuilding it, not building it, and inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. You know what? Israel is not, there's never going to be an earth now without Israel in the land of Israel. There'll never be a time from this time on that there won't, well, until the new heaven and earth, obviously, when we don't know what things will look like then. But right now, Israel is in the land of Israel. Through the tribulation period, Israel is in the land of Israel. In the millennial kingdom, Israel is going to be in the land of Israel. It's never going to change. The Antichrist is going to try and defeat Israel, destroy Israel. It's not going to happen. It says, I will plant them in their land, and they shall no more be pulled up. And you know what? They're no more going to be pulled up out of their land. This has begun, the signs of the end times have begun, and Israel's going to stay right where they are. All right, so now I've alluded to this. Let's look at some verses that talk about our tabernacle, our bodies, our temporary tents. So this is 2 Corinthians 5. It says, for we know that our house here on earth, our tent, is destroyed. We have a building from God, a house not made with hands, everlasting in the heavens. So no matter what happens to our bodies, we're going to die. Unless Jesus comes back before we die, we're going to die. And when we do, in that moment, we're going to see Jesus Christ face to face and go, man, what just happened? I mean, it's going to be the blink of an eye. I'm in anesthesia. Every day I see this picture, not because Jesus returns or I'm killing my patients or anything like that, but every day under anesthesia, when people go to sleep, the next moment in time is the recovery room. And every day we hear people say, when are we going to get started? Because that blink of an eye of that anesthetic happens so quickly and so completely that one minute you're walking through your yard and the next minute you're going to see Jesus Christ for, if you were to pass away, or the trumpet blows. Now you will hear the trumpet. And actually, if you're dead, you'll hear the trumpet too. It says that, the dead in Christ will rise when we hear the trumpet. But it's that picture. It happens so quickly that whatever happens to you when you die or Jesus comes back, suddenly you're going to be in the air with him. You're going to go, can we try that again? I didn't put that all together right away. But then you'll understand what just happened. And so in the moment that this body is destroyed, we put on our body in heaven. So it's going to happen that quickly. So this is from 2 Peter chapter 1. Knowing that the putting off of my tent comes swiftly, even as our Lord Jesus Christ made clear to me. Again, this tabernacle is temporary, and that the one that's coming is immortal. And again, here it is. Looking forward to our incorruptible body being put on and our dwelling with God forever. So our tabernacle will be with God for the rest of time. Okay, so let's look at the the Feast of Tabernacles is the only one that talks about being done forever. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but in the giving of the Feast of Tabernacles in Leviticus, it says this feast is to be done for all time. Now, I don't know if that means at the new heaven and earth it's going to be ended then or whatever, but it says you're going to do this feast forever. And in Zechariah 14, in these 4 verses, 3 times it says if you don't come up, so this is talking about a future, I believe it's talking about the millennial kingdom because it talks about Egypt. It singles out Egypt. Poor Egypt. I don't know what is about Egypt, but apparently they're going to have the idea about not coming up for tabernacles during the millennial kingdom. And 3 times God says, look, if you don't come up for tabernacles during the millennial kingdom, you're not going to get rain, you're going to get plagues, and you're going to get punished. And so this feast is going to be done in the millennial kingdom. I don't know if they all are, but this one specifically says it's going to be done in the millennial kingdom. And if you don't come up for it, if you for 3 of the feasts, all the children, all the men of Israel, presumably they tell the men because they're going to bring their families. So all Israel was supposed to come for the spring 3 feasts of Passover, first fruits, and unleavened bread, because they all happen in the same week. You're supposed to be there for those 3. You're supposed to be in Israel for Pentecost, and you're supposed to be in Israel for Tabernacles. So of the 7, you're supposed to be in Israel for those 3 and bring gifts and, go to the temple and the hours of prayer and all that. It was a big celebration. It's what they did. But in the future, Tabernacles apparently is still going to be done. And if you don't come up, the whole earth is supposed to come up to Jerusalem. If you don't, you won't get rain, you're going to get plagues, and you're going to get, punished. And look in verse 19, Egypt is singled out, it says all nations, but somehow I think Egypt might be watched a little more closely. I don't know. There's something about Egypt and God. All right, so that's tabernacles. But now there's an interesting twist on tabernacles. And that comes the day, so Tabernacles is 7 days. It's 1 week long, so from the 15th to the 21st. On the 22nd of Tabernacles is a special day added on the end called the 8th day. So remember, Tabernacles is 7 days, and what's the next day? Is the 8th day. So in Hebrew, the name for this feast is the 8th day. And it's a very interesting day because it's the number 8, and in the Bible, the number 8 always connotes a new beginning. And you can, if you're into numerology, there's a Bollinger book called Numbers in Scripture. It's all about things like this. But the number 8 always connotes a new beginning. And the theme of the 8th day is rejoicing in the Torah. Now they would say it's rejoicing in the written Torah, but it's a picture of something new, a new beginning, a new heaven and a new earth, and rejoicing in the written Torah. That was a special day at the end of the 7 days of tabernacle, and those were the themes. Now we would say that yes, it's rejoicing in the Torah, but not the written Torah. We're going to see this as a day just for rejoicing in the Messiah, about the Messiah, all the Messiah has done for us. It's going to be a day of rejoicing in the living Word, who is Christ Jesus, Yeshua. So it's a day of rejoicing. It's a picture of the new heaven and earth, and it's all about the Messiah in that day. And look at this. So Habakkuk chapter 2, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as waters cover the sea. And this is all about the 8th day. And now, just so you think that, so you don't think that any of this is isolated, the pictures of all these feasts appear in the book of Revelation. And that's a teaching all by itself. You can go to the book of Revelation and find pictures of all 7 feasts in the book of Revelation. And I'm going to show you the tabernacles just in one little section of Revelation 21. So look at the themes that we talked about, and look how they show up about tabernacles in the 8th day. So this is Revelation 21. It says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and the sea is no more. And I saw a holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of the throne saying, look, the tabernacle of God is with man, and he will live with them. Remember, it's about tabernacles. It's about dwelling eternally with God eventually. It says, and he will live with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither will there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. The former things have passed away. So, oh my gosh, look at that. It's all about the new heaven and earth. It's all about, the new Jerusalem. It's all about a bride. There's attributes of Rosh Hashanah in there. It's all about, the king, being with his people, Rosh Hashanah. The tabernacle is in there. No more death, no more mourning. Yom Kippur is in there. Just in these few verses, you can see almost all. There probably is all 7 feasts in those couple of verses. You just have to dig in there. And that's what God calls us to do. It says he hides a thing. It's the glory of kings to search it out. So, it's just everywhere you look. All right, so now let's summarize the fall feast. And what I'm going to tell you now is my opinion only, okay? We've seen the picture of the spring feast. I've shown you now the picture of the fall feast. This is how Gary Theisen, sees them fitting together. And people have different opinions on this. I'm going to give it the way I see it. I'm going to give it the way I see the symmetry of God and the way I think it's going to play out in the next few years. So I'm going to talk about how the feasts are fulfilled. They will be fulfilled in order. Anybody who says that, oh no, in the fall, Jesus is going to come back and it'll be Yom Kippur and then first fruits or Rosh Hashanah will come later. I absolutely know that's not true. If anybody tries to tell you the feasts are going to occur out of order, that you can just right there just say, well, not, good meeting you, thanks. You can enter dialogue, but there's just no way these are going to come out of order. Now, it could be they're not going to happen in the same year. In fact, I'm absolutely sure they're not going to happen in the same year, and I'll tell you why. But they are going to happen in the right order, and they're going to happen on the exact day. So the exact day, the exact time, and the exact picture that they're portraying are you can take it to the bank. That's the way it's going to occur. All right, so on some future Rosh Hashanah, there's going to be a gathering together. It's all about trumpets, resurrection of the dead. We're going to see our Messiah as king. We're going to a wedding feast, kids. There's going to be a wedding feast of the Lamb, and we're going as the bride. The whole picture of the body of Christ is the bride, the body of Christ, just like the bride and groom are body, head and body. We're going to be the bride, the bride and the body of Christ. So it's all about Rosh Hashanah. The last trump, I believe that's true. I believe on the last, as that sun is setting on the last day of Rosh Hashanah in some time zone, and is God going to be really dramatic and wait till the last sunset on the international date line when all the rest of us in Jerusalem and New York and all the other time zones have gone, dang, it didn't happen. I could have swore this was going to be it. And that last little glint of sun in the last time zone of the international date line, and then the trumpet sounds and we go, I don't know. God can be very dramatic, as you well know. So I don't know which time zone. I don't know if it's going to be in Jerusalem. It happened in Jerusalem in the spring feast. Are we tied to Jerusalem in the last feast? I don't know. So Rosh Hashanah, some future Rosh Hashanah, we're going to go. And the next thing to happen are those 7 days of awe. So from the end of the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah to the day of Yom Kippur is those 7 days in between. And those 7 days are the days of awe. Now remember, on the days of awe, the gate is still open, or the gate or door of heaven is still open. The books of life are still open. You still can make a decision for Messiah during those days of awe, 7 days. I believe those 7 days represent the 7 years of tribulation, because when we go, I think the next thing to happen is the tribulation begins. And those 7 years of tribulation are the days when the gate of heaven is still open, the books of life are still open. People on earth are going to go through the most horrific time ever. It says if those days weren't shortened, all mankind would perish. And during those days, people can decide whether Messiah is right or the Antichrist is right. And they get to make that choice. We've all been able to make that choice, whether to obey or disobey. And depending on your choice, you're going to live in your, sin or your redemption when the next Yom Kippur comes. So, Rosh Hashanah, the 7 years of tribulation, then at the end of those 7 years, in the fall, because remember, it's 7 years. So we left in the fall. Then at the end of 7 years, it's going to be in the fall. And the next feast is going to be Yom Kippur. So 1 year to the day will be Rosh Hashanah. 7 days later, through those days of awe in that day, on a future Yom Kippur, Jesus is going to come back riding a white horse with us to fight the battle of Armageddon, to bind the adversary and to subdue the earth. On that day, I believe when his feet touch the Mount of Olives, the gate of heaven closes, the book of life closes. People are then made their choice with no second guessing, no, going back, no redos, and they're going to be judged in that time frame based on where they decided. So that's going to be a future Yom Kippur. 5 days later is the Feast of Tabernacles, which is all about millennial kingdom, abundance, living with the king. The king will reign in an amazing life. That will start the 1,000-year reign of the millennial kingdom, of justice on the earth. The devil will be bound at the beginning of the millennial kingdom. At the end of the millennial kingdom, the devil will be destroyed. And what's the day after Tabernacles? The 8th day. And the 8th day is all about the new heaven and earth. So the last feast to be fulfilled is going to be that 8th day. When the 1,000 years are up and the new beginning begins. That's when the new Jerusalem's going to come down. That's when God will dwell with us. And we're going to, dwell with him throughout the rest of time, if there even is such a thing as time. So the 8th day at the end of the millennial kingdom we're going to celebrate, Messiah. That's the picture of, the new heaven and earth. And we're going to begin some interesting, time from that point on. It says it hasn't even entered the mind of man what awaits us. So it's going to be something completely outside the 9 dots. All right. So here's the part of this talk that you don't want to hear. And it's this. So now that's the end of the introduction. So for you who are collectively moaning, your moaning is not coming through because we have you all muted. So that's the end of the introduction. But now we get to the really good stuff. And now we can begin because we've looked at the first calendar, which is the lights of heaven. and we've looked at the second calendar, which are the feast days. And as amazing are each of those on their own, they're nothing like they are together. So the two of these calendars together present, I believe, what God has wanted to do all along, and that is to show us not only what he's done in the past more clearly, and not only what he's doing right now more clearly, but also his plan. Because it says in the Old Testament, God does nothing but reveal his plan to his prophets. Now, I do not claim to be a prophet. In fact, I'm the opposite of a prophet. But I do know this: I can take what's coming out information-wise, and I can help to put things together. And I keep track of what NASA says, and I keep track of what the worldly news says, because NASA's talking like NASA, and the worldly news is talking like worldly news. But we're listening with God's ears. We're seeing with God's eyes. We're thinking with the spirit that God has given us, and we see some little thing in the news or some little thing that NASA says or some little things happening in heaven, and we go, ding, 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 ding. This is something way bigger than the talking heads on TV are relaying. And so we get to see both calendars and things going on in the past and the present and the future, and we get to put it together in a way that I believe God is helping us to see. All right, so this is where we started. Lift up your eyes, star date 2016. And the important thing about this is this: the feasts are not objective. The feasts were given by God on specific days. They have specific themes. There's nothing objective about it. But the other objective thing about the other calendar is we can't mess with the stars. So the stars and the planets are the most objective thing God has given us, because we can't reach up and change what the sun's doing. We can't reach up and change what Virgo's doing. The problem we have is we can't read them accurately. So we can see what's going on in the stars, and we know the intent is that God is trying to show us something because his clock is still running, but we cannot read them the way that he wants us to. Now, I think more and more we're starting to see how they were, what the future's showing us. And so, I can go back now and see what I think exactly the Magi saw, and knowing the Magi saw something to get them to leave their homeland, I can say, what's the pattern the Magi saw? What are the details? And then maybe look into the future and say, all right, this happened for the Magi. I didn't see this in the future, but now I do, and I can learn more about the future. So we're trying to learn how to tell time on God's clock. All right, so the Magi saw something. I believe it was the combination of planets and stars. The stars are the background. They were movable, but the planets did something that was out of the ordinary. And they saw that and said, it's time to go. All right, so the first thing we have to do is introduce the players. What are the players in the sky that God is using to tell us his story? Well, the first is the sun. Now, I always used to think the sun was God. It's the biggest, brightest thing. God's the biggest, brightest thing in our universe. And the sun had to be God. Well, it dawned on me this year that that can't be true, because every verse where it talks about the sun is almost always an allusion to the Messiah. So we read the one in Psalm 19, but there's one in Malachi chapter 4. It says, but you who fear my name, the sun, and it's spelled S-U-N. I mean, the Hebrew is the actual sun, the son of righteousness. Let's see, I'll read it again. But you who fear my name, will the son of righteousness arise with healing in his wings? Well, now that word wings is tzitzit, which is the hem of his garment. The hem of the garment is the tzitzit. Well, when did Jesus have healing in the hem of his garment? Are you getting goosebumps right now like I am? The hem of his garment was this was a prophecy of the time when the woman who had the bleeding for 12 years touched the hem of his garment and was healed. That's the prophecy of Malachi 4:2. And the Son is Messiah. And now, if you need another verse about the Son being Messiah, and we read this in Psalm 19, it says, in the stars, in the heavens, God has set a tent for the Son, which comes out like a bridegroom. Again, it's the picture of the Messiah, leaving his chamber, his chuppah, his wedding chamber, like a strong man rejoicing to run his course. So again, I used to think the Son was God. I have to tell you now, I believe for sure the Son is Messiah. Okay, so now the moon is a picture of us. And for people looking at this, the reason is because mankind blows hot and blows cold. The moon is always changing. The moon is new, like we're new in Christ. We start to put on more of God's word. We get more and more full as we're reflecting the light of the sun. We're supposed to be, mimic the Messiah who mimics God. Jesus walked in God's footsteps. We're supposed to walk in Jesus' footsteps. As we turn toward that light, we shine brighter and brighter until one day we lose it all and we kind of in our minds go back to the beginning and we have to start all over. So the moon is the picture of man. We continually blow hot and cold. So we're always changing our phases and our picture of how we believe in God in our life. So that's the moon. The Mercury is the closest planet to God. Well, the closest planet to the sun, sorry. And so to me, Mercury's always been the sun's right-hand man. And I will take that to be like, a warrior, a messenger, the general. And I always take that to be Michael, the archangel. So Michael was the angel that always stood up for God's people. To me, that's the picture of Mercury. And it's whenever you see Mercury in the sky, and we'll see why this is important when we talk about Mercury more. But whenever you see Mercury in the sky, to me, it's a picture of Michael, the archangel, who stands up and fights for God's people. Now, Venus is easy. Venus is called the bright and morning star, or the bright and evening star. Either way, it's a picture of the Messiah. And, Jesus is referred to as the bright and morning star. Now, Satan is also referred to as a morning star, but not the bright and morning star. And so Satan, I believe, was a picture of the first Messiah, just like second Adam. Satan was a picture of Messiah. Satan was God's right-hand man, the same way Messiah is going to sit down at the right hand of God. Satan, I believe, ran God's show back then, and not the same way Messiah is going to run God's show. I believe there's a lot of corollary there. The same way Satan is going to fall with all his evil angels, Messiah is going to be restored to Satan's spot, and all the angels, I believe, are going to be us, all the people who were faithful in Messiah. So the symmetry of God is there. His right-hand man fell with all his minions. We, with Messiah, are going to replace those people. So Venus, I believe, is a picture of Messiah as the bright and morning star. And just as a side note, I believe we're going to replace all the fallen angels as well. I mean, I don't have exact scripture reference to that, but it's alluded to in the Bible. Again, dig into it, see if I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but challenge it. All right, so the king planet, Jupiter has always been called the king planet. Again, it always refers to the Messiah. Now, so think about this now. I've already named three things which I've referred to as the Messiah. But there's a constellation named Leo. That's a picture of the Messiah. I believe there's many things that are pictures of the Messiah, but just like God and just like his word, the Messiah is full of facets. And there's so many attributes of the Messiah: prophet, priest, king, husband, all these, son of God, all these things about Messiah. And all these things, whether he's the sun, whether he's Venus, whether he's Jupiter, whether he's Leo the lion, they're attributes of the Messiah, things that we can learn more and more of the detailed picture of Messiah. So because many things represent the Messiah, don't let that throw you. All right, so Mars is one of the couple things in the sky that are red. So Mars is literally the name of the Roman god of war. So the Roman god of war was Mars. And Mars is red. Red represents blood. Red represents conflict. Red represents war. And wherever we're going to see Mars in the heaven, that's the picture that Mars brings. Okay, now there's the other planet that you can see is Saturn. And Saturn always represents Satan. Saturn is always bad. And I'm going to give you several references for why that's true. But there are some places where I saw where people say Saturn represents attributes of the Messiah. I don't believe that's true. I believe Saturn is always bad. And the reason is this: Saturn is correlated with the star of Moloch. And I get that so this is Amos chapter 5. And Amos chapter 5 says, "But ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chion is the word from which the reference is made to Saturn. let's see. You have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and Chion, your images, the star of your God, which you made yourselves. Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, saith the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. So Chion was an Assyrian star deity, astral deity. It means a star deity. And this Assyrian deity was referred to as the slowest visible object. Now, there's only one visible object in our sky which is slow, and that's Saturn. Saturn's the slowest of the slow. It takes 30 years to go around the sky. Even Leo goes around the sky faster than 30 years. It only takes a year for Leo to go around the sky as a zodiac, constellation. So the slowest thing in the sky is Saturn. And then, therefore, the picture is of the god of Moloch, the star of your god Moloch from Amos chapter 5. And it is a picture of evil. To me, it's a picture of Satan and all that evil represents. Now, this I did not know, and this I learned this year, is that this same reference occurs in the New Testament, which I was like blown away. People said, oh yeah, it's in the book of Acts. I'm like, what? Sure enough, here it is. So this is Stephen in the book of Acts giving his monologue just before he's stoned to death, giving his monologue, and he says, this is Acts chapter 7, verses 42 and 43. It says, but God turned and gave them up to serve the army of heaven, as it is written in the scroll of the prophets, and we just read it, it's Amos. Did you offer to me slain animals and sacrifices 40 years in the desert, O house of Israel? But you took along the tent of Moloch. Remember, it says let's see. It says you have borne the tabernacle of your God. That's Amos 5:26. But he says, and you took along the tent of Moloch. You borne the tabernacle. It's portable. Remember tabernacles. And the star of the god Rephan. That's the Greek word for that word from the Hebrew. The images that you made to worship them, so I will carry you away to Babylon. So we know this is bad because this represented a big sin of Israel. It ended up getting them cast into Babylon, and God did not like it one bit. So Saturn, therefore, is the representative of all that is evil in the sky. It's the picture of all things evil. Now, as if that wasn't enough, I'll give you one more. And this is from 2 Kings 17. And basically, it's the story of how Israel rejected the statutes of God, verse 15, rejected his covenant, and they began to do all things bad. They followed their own vanities. They became vain. They went after heathen things. Remember, this was the god of Moloch. They went after heathen things. Verse 16 says, and they left all the commandments of the Lord their God and made them molten images. The golden calf is all part of that. The pictures of their gods from Egypt, even 2 calves, and made a grove. Remember, groves were bad, and worshipped all the host of heaven. So this was astrology in the worst way. They took the story of God, and they took all the stars, all the constellations, and all the planets, and they took the best things that God gave for them to know about him and turned it into the worst things about what it meant to be heathen. Turned it into astrology and, the picture of our future in the stars, our daily bit of astrology in the stars, and just, and they basically bowed down and served Baal, the end of verse 16 there, and served Baal. It says, verse 17, and they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire. Well, which God caused the young people, the babies, to pass through the fire? But Moloch. All this is interwoven. It says, and used divination and enchantments and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord. And who sells themselves to do evil? It's all about prostitution, mental, physical, and spiritual prostitution. And it provoked God to anger. End of verse 17 there. Verse 18, therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. So, Satan is the evil in the sky. That's my point there. Okay, so what about the constellations? Well, there's many constellations, and I believe we've lost the meanings of quite a few of them. And certainly we've lost the nuances of even the ones that we know. And even Bollinger's book, Witness of the Stars, I believe he's doing the best he can with what he knew at the time to write about the nuances of those pictures. But even he talks about the controversies, was this really that picture or was it something else? was this, the crab, or was it this? I mean, even then, it's unclear. So some of this we're not going to know until we get the red dot on our foreheads, because we're going to go, oh, I should have known that. Oh, I should have known that. So we know constellations are up there. We know some of what they mean, but we don't know everything. And it's hampering our ability to use God's clock for the purpose he gave, and that was to tell the signs of the times. So Leo the lion, we know it's a picture of the Messiah. He's the conquering king, the Lion of Judah. The heart of Leo the lion is a picture of the Messiah, Regulus. The same way the tribe of Judah was the lion, but the heart of the tribe of Judah is the Messiah. And so Regulus was, not only is Leo the lion a picture of the Messiah, the heart of Leo the lion is the picture of the Messiah. Virgo was a picture either of Israel as the mother of, the things of God, Mother Israel, or it was a picture of the Virgin Mary, the birth of the Messiah. So Israel gave birth to the, Messiah through the scriptures, but Mary gave birth to the physical, actual Messiah. So Virgo is a picture of one of those two. And in Virgo is a star called Samach. So at Virgo's left hand, in the picture of Virgo, she's holding a sheaf of barley. Now, what was the first fruits on the Feast of First Fruits? It celebrated the harvest. It was the first fruits of the harvest of the barley. And so in Virgo, she's holding in her left hand barley. The star that's right there is called Samach, or Spica. You might know the Arabic name is Spica. The Hebrew name is Samach. Samach means the branch. And go look up branch in the Old Testament. Several times the branch Samach in the Old Testament refers to, you guessed it, Messiah. So even in constellations about Messiah, there are stars, even more detail about the picture of the Messiah. And that picture is the first fruits that he was, the branch that he is from God's, prophecy about, the Messiah. All right, so there's many other constellations, and we just don't know enough about it. So some of them we know, some we don't know. We do know they're all important, and they're about the, about the Yahweh's story. Okay, I'm doing a little adjusting. That's okay. I kicked the, okay. All right. Okay, so now not only are there constellations, but there are also eclipses and other phenomena. So there's a lot going on. There's supernova, there's comets. Are they all pictures of what God's trying to tell us? I'm going to say yes, but like comets, do we really know? I mean, they happen so infrequently. What do we know about them? I bet if we studied it in more detail, that the answers would show up in the Bible. But right now, we're just not that smart. Okay, so now we're going to actually talk about the timeline. So this is the part you've been waiting for. I hope you're still with me, because this is now the putting it all together. So this is the real, the chewy caramel center of the Tootsie Pop, about what we started off to do. So it's taken all this time. This is all background to get to where we want to be. So, and I'm going to start with the blood red moons. And the reason I'm going to start with the blood red moons is because this was the thing that got our minds off of ourselves in the worst possible way, and our eyes up to not only the heavens, but to God's word about showing us that there's many things going on that we don't understand. So the blood red moons were very dramatic, and it really started us looking up. And I'm going to tell you this saying. So the Talmud is the Jewish written sayings. So it's not scripture, but they're the written sayings about the Torah. So the Talmud is the traditions, the written traditions about the Torah. So there's and the Babylonians the Jews who were in Babylon wrote about the Torah, and in the Babylonian Talmud, it says this. It says that solar eclipses were bad for the nations, but lunar eclipses were bad for Israel. Now, solar eclipses is where you have the sun and the moon gets between the sun and the earth. So you have the earth, and then you have the moon, and then you have the sun. So the moon casts a shadow on the earth. That's a solar eclipse. The sun is blocked. And a lunar eclipse is where the earth gets between the moon and the sun. And so the shadow of the earth is cast across the moon. That's a lunar eclipse. So the Babylonian Talmud, because we're going to talk about both here in a minute. So the Babylonian Talmud said, and this is in general, this is not God's word, I'm just telling you, that solar eclipses were bad for the nations, but lunar eclipses were bad for Israel. Now the blood red moons, all four were lunar eclipses. And they happened in 2004 and 2005. And they were, two happened in the spring and two happened in the fall. So in the spring of 2004 was a lunar eclipse, and then the fall of 2004 was a lunar eclipse. In the spring of 2005 was a lunar eclipse, and the fall of 2005 was a lunar eclipse. And that, and according to the Babylonian Talmud, those are bad for Israel. So did they have significance? When they occur like that in a pattern of four, it's very unusual, happen very infrequently. And I don't mean to get off on the blood red moons because there's a lot on those in the on YouTubes and books written about it and all that. So there's plenty if you want to look that up. But if they were significant for Israel, did Israel go to war during that time? Yes, there was the Gaza war in Gaza, which it just so happened John Schoenheit and a group that included my wife and I and some of my kids were in Israel during the blood red moons. And so we were, rockets were being fired back and forth during that time. So there was war in Israel, but not a big war in Israel. Was there economic trouble in Israel and in the world? Yes, there was. But again, it didn't seem to be that huge. A lot of that stuff is going on all the time. So could you really say that the blood red moons were saying?
Hey, Gary?
Yes.
We had a question about Virgo. We've got a couple other questions too I'm holding off on.
Okay.
But this one was about Virgo. Question, and this is from Dave or Carol. Is the Queen of Heaven a perversion of Virgo?
Well, if it's used as an astrology thing, then I think yes. But otherwise, I'm not sure. We'd have to look that up. And
then a minute ago, you said 2004 and 2005 with the blood.
2014 and 2015, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The slides are right. So I might say the wrong thing, but the slides are right. Okay. And we are going to get into more of the constellations. So I'm just telling you how all this began, and it began with the blood red moons. So yes, they were significant. But really, I think their significance was this. It got our attention on the sky. The blood red moons happening when they did, and they were red. They were blood red. Now, we think a blood red is really bright crimson, and really a blood red moon is kind of an orange or copper color. And it's a phenomena that happens in space based on the way the eclipse occurs. And you can read more about that, but either eclipses are just a shadow across the moon, but sometimes they have a color, and that color is red. And it's just a physical property of the way the eclipse occurs. But a blood red moon, talks about blood red moons in the Old Testament. So certainly it got us thinking about all things prophetic. And I think that was the main significance of the blood red moons. Now, people will argue about other meanings of that. But to me, the biggest thing about the blood red moons is, one, it got our attention on the sky, and two, they occurred during the feast days. Like I said, 2 on Passover and 2 on Tabernacles. It's the first time that we really saw the correlation, up big and close, of what's happening in the sky and God's prophetic calendar of his feast days. And to me, those were the two biggest things. It got our minds on the sky, and it got our minds on the feast days, so we can see the patterns of what is yet to come. So it got our attention on the sky and then on the Feast of Israel. So let's start to look at the timelines. And so what we're going to notice is that these events are not occurring by coincidence. That these events we're going to talk about occurred in very specific ways in the sky and occurred on very specific days on Earth. And the question is this: do the stars and the planets and the feast days combine to help us see what the day and time are? Now, again, we might not know the specific day and hour, but we certainly can know the day and time. And I'm going to say, again, we don't know everything, But I'm going to say we're supposed to know things. There's things we can know, and I believe all this is part of that. And that Paul is not saying you won't know the day or hour. Jesus is not saying you won't know the day or hour. They're saying just the opposite. You should be paying attention. You should know the time of the first visitation. We should know the time of his second visitation. That day is not going to take us like a thief in the night, because we're starting to get this more and more. All right, so I believe that in my perspective, that this past August was really the beginning of the slew of events that's going to occur in the next handful of years that should have gotten our attention. And the first one occurred in August 23rd of this past. So right now I'm doing this in the middle of October. So a month and a half ago well, actually about 2 months ago, was the middle of August, August 23rd. And something very unique happened on that day. And actually, this took several weeks to occur. And the pattern was very easy to see in the sky, that something weird was going on. So a lot of times these things don't occur in just a few hours. Now, some of these patterns do occur in a couple hours and they're gone. But this one in particular occurred over several weeks and was occurring a little bit by little each night. And the pattern was there. God was definitely trying to get our attention. And what happened was this, that in Scorpio, now Scorpio, the scorpion, the scorpion is portrayed in the Bible as something bad. Talks about how Satan is going to bruise the heel of the Messiah. In the Old Testament, the scorpion, Dan is called a scorpion who stings the rider on the heel. And the rider is a picture of Judah. So Dan, as a scorpion, is pictured as someone who stings the Messiah on the heel. Now, I'm not reading into that any more than I'm telling you what it says in the Old Testament. But in the Old Testament, a scorpion is a bad thing, and stinging, especially on the heel, comes up more than once. And so Scorpio, and I happen to be a Scorpio, so I'm not saying I'm bad, but we'll have to see how this goes, how my life goes. But Scorpio is a bad thing in the sky, I think. There is attributes about the Messiah in Scorpio, so don't get me wrong on that. But I think when things happen in Scorpio, it's meant to get our attention about things that aren't good. So the other thing about Scorpio is the heart of the scorpion is a star called Antares. And guess what color Antares is? It's red. So there's only a few things in the sky are red, and one happens to be the heart of the scorpion, which I believe is bad. So you got something that's red. Remember I said Mars is red. It refers to blood or war or conflict. So now look what happened in August 23rd. You got the three things in the sky that are really bad, and they all came together. So on August 23rd, over weeks of approaching, now remember, Antares is not moving. Saturn moves very slowly, and so really what the picture was Mars coming in to meet the other three, but on that day, the three of them were as close as they can get. I mean, as close as things get in the sky, those three were very, very close. So you have Saturn, which I said was Satan, always bad. You have Mars, which I said is always about, blood or conflict or war, always bad. And you had the heart of the scorpion, who's always bad, and the heart being Antares, which happens to be the name for the Greek god of war. So you got the Roman god of war, you got the Greek god of war, and you got Satan, and they all got together in one spot on this day in August. Now keep in mind, Saturn takes how many years to go around the sky? 30 years. Saturn takes 30 years to go around the sky. So you might say, oh, that's nothing, it happens all the time. Well, it's not going to happen again in another 30 years. And when it does happen in another 30 years, there's no saying that all these things are going to happen just the way they've happened. So could it be some sort of portent about the bad guys getting together to do something? And I would call this a powwow for what's about to happen. I believe that it was a picture of the bad guys coming together to plan the war that's about to break loose in the heavens and possibly on earth. But if you say it wasn't a bad thing and it just happened and it's just something that happened in the sky, that's fine. But if you say, oh yeah, it means something bad, but it's, maybe the next time it happens, it's going to be a bad thing. Well, you know what? I'm probably going to be dead in 30 years, so I really don't care. And I'm looking at the things that are happening in my lifetime and trying to make sense out of them based on the symmetry of God. And this is what I picture. And the other thing that I think makes this significant is what happened less than 4 days later. And less than 4 days later, about 4 days later, it's actually less than 24-hour days, but so less than 4 days later, on August 27th, the good guys got together. Now it's bad enough, it's a long shot enough for the bad guys to get together, but a couple days later, the good guys get together. I mean, what are the odds of that? It just seems, when I saw it happening, and I saw this months ago, when I saw this happening, I thought, there's something more to this than meets the eye, that both of these things would be occurring so close together. So the good guys were Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. So Jupiter is the king planet. Mercury is the bright and morning star. Mercury, I believe, is Michael the archangel. Michael, who stands up and fights for God's people. They also came together 3 days later, well, a little less than 4 days later. They also came together on the other side of the sky. These things were at almost complete opposition. So you got the bad guys got together over here, the good guys got together over here, so close together. What is the picture showing? The bad guys planning for war and the good guys saying, uh-oh, look what's going on over there. We need to get our act together, and we need to have a plan to counter the bad guys. And I believe that's exactly what was going on in the sky. All right, so the next significant thing that happens on my birthday. And that is November 20th. Now, I don't believe that I was born to be part of this picture. I'm just saying this happens on my birthday. So on November 20th, in the night sky, the planet Jupiter, the king planet, is in Virgo. So remember, it takes a year for Jupiter to go around the sky. So Jupiter is in Virgo right now. But in about a month, Virgo is going to cross into an imaginary plane of a 4-star box that makes up the abdomen of Virgo. So Jupiter is in Virgo now because, it takes a year to get through Virgo. So, it had to get there already, but it's not in the box. So there's a box, a 4-star box that makes up the abdomen of Virgo. And on my birthday, it crosses the imaginary plane of that box and gets into the box. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So that's going to happen on November 20th. The next big thing that happens is not foretold at all, I believe, in the stars. I believe the next thing, it could be, and we've just not seen it. But the same way the 3 bad guys I'll go back before that. The same way the blood red moons happened to get our attention, whether or not they had a bigger sign than that, and there's a lot of people who say it did have a bigger sign, and I'm okay with that. But I believe the biggest thing about the 4 blood moons is, 1, get our minds on the stars, and 2, get our minds on the feast days. But this year, with the 4 bad guys, or the 3 bad guys meeting, and the 4 good guys, or the 3 good guys meeting, I don't believe there's any biblical significance to that, although there might be verses about that, about, the bad guys making counsel for war and the good guys making counsel for war. Dig into that and see if you find anything. I'd love to hear about it. But I believe it's to get our minds, again, on the sky. And I believe this next event, this solar eclipse, there's nothing about it in the scriptures, but the way it happens and the day it happens are unmistakable. There's something absolutely significant about it, but I don't believe it's prophetic. So some of these things, God is just, again, hitting us in the forehead so we get it. And I think this is one of those things. All right, so August 21st of next summer. So August 21st next summer is going to be one of the most dramatic events to ever happen in our lifetime. And you will not see anything like this again for a long, long time. And it's an eclipse of the sun, and it's going to go right through the middle of the United States. We have not seen anything like this in eons, and maybe ever. And it's going to, it's a solar eclipse going to go right through the center of the United States. The path of the eclipse, so the densest part of the shadow, doesn't touch any other nation. Now, remember I told you that solar eclipses are bad for the nations, lunar eclipses are bad for Israel. They had their shot. Now we're getting our shot. We're about to go through a solar eclipse that only touches it will be able to be seen in Canada and North America, but the path of totality, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute, the darkest part of the shadow only touches the United States and no other nation. So is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know, but it's going to happen. So it starts in the Pacific Ocean. It enters through the mid part of Oregon. It goes right through the heart of the United States. Casper, Wyoming, I think. St. Louis is very near it, Nashville, and it goes out over either Charleston or Columbia, I think Charleston, South Carolina. And it ends in the Atlantic Ocean. So no part of the darkest part of the shadow touches any other nation. And that by itself, I think it has some significance. And as I told you, a total eclipse is when the moon passes between the sun and the earth. And so the moon casts a shadow on the earth. And it causes a little dark streak. It's about 50 miles wide, and it travels so it's a little dark circle, and it travels across the face of the earth, depending on, because the sun is moving, the earth is moving, the moon is moving. And that shadow just crosses the face of the earth. And the only part you can see it is where the shadow is the darkest. So you got to be in the middle of that shadow or somewhere in that shadow to see it in the darkest part of the eclipse. So you need to look, and I'm going to show you a map of where it's going to occur. And if you go online, there's just buku YouTubes about this. You can go to the nasa.gov website. There's a lot of websites about eclipse, August eclipse 2017. They'll give you a lot more information on this, but you need to get yourself into that shadow. So unless you're in that shadow, you're not going to see it the way it needs to be seen. And this is going to be a very rare event. So you want to get in and see it. So again, there's lots of websites, and these are just a few. Believe me, just put in Google Eclipse 2017, and you'll find lots of websites on it. So from a look in the outer space, it's going to look something like this. Now, this is the path of the shadow, but remember, the actual point of the shadow is just going to be a round circle that's going to travel across the United States. So it doesn't leave a dark line like that. It's just from space, it would just look like a big black dot. And believe me, you will see pictures from nasa.gov and satellite pictures of that spot on the planet Earth, because they'll take pictures of it from space and get pictures of it all the way along. It's just this round dot moving across the surface of the United States. So it's pretty dramatic. Now there are Google Earth or Google Map, where you can go down to street level, and I've already done this because I've figured out the place that I want to be when I watch this. So you can find Google Maps that will go down to street level. I mean, literally the neighborhoods that you want to be in, and they'll show you. You can look at a place to park. You can find the parking lots, whatever that's there, and it'll show you ground zero, so you're in the right spot. And you can zoom right in and make your plans to be right in the right spot, right at the right time. Now, I will say this, and so a couple things you need to think about in seeing this. One is you need to make plans now, because this is a Monday afternoon. We got different time zones, so you want to make sure you got the right time for your time zone. But it's a Monday. You're supposed to be at work, and you don't want to be at work. So you need to call ahead and tell them now, almost a year in advance, and say, look, I'm not going to be there August 21st, because as soon as your coworkers find out about this, you can be guaranteed they're going to get ahead in line, and you won't get that day off because they're going to have somebody at work. And so you need to tell your boss now, and all right, so little white lies, I need to do a family event, or it's a wedding. Well, technically, it could be a wedding. But you need to be somewhere the shadow is, and you need to make plans to be there now. If you need to fly, get plane tickets. I got more of that now. Literally, it's going to be a zoo. Everywhere in the shadow, the whole world is coming to see this. And where there's been total eclipses in the past, it's been true no matter where they are. The whole world is coming to see this. People from Japan, people from China, people from Australia. And when you're in the path of totality, you are not going to be alone. There's going to be cars, there's going to be crowds, there's going to be people galore. And so if you need the day off, you need to be asking for it now. If you need to travel, you need to think about it now. If you need a place to stay in a couple of weeks or months, there's going to be no hotel within 100 miles of the path of totality. So you need to plan where you're going to be and how you're going to be there. And so the travel, the food, the reservations for flights, you need to make sure all that is true. Okay, and you need to pray the skies are clear. So it's less cloudy in Wyoming. I'm just saying there's going to be more clouds in Oregon, more clouds in, Tennessee, more clouds in South Carolina. So you need to think about the weather. And you may actually have to travel, looking at the weather, patterns in advance. You need to follow the weather leading up to this, because if it's not going to be clear, you need to get in your car and go and find somewhere where it's going to be clear, because you don't want to do all this planning and then see a shadow covered by clouds. So it's just not going to be the same. All right, check your local time. Most importantly, you need eye protection. And so you should never look at an eclipse, even during the eclipse. You shouldn't, because you can still get damage to your retina. So you can go online and find all kinds of these inexpensive eclipse glasses. You can use welder's glasses, welder's mask, all that. But you should buy some in advance, because again, they're going to be scarce to find. Once people figure out this is coming, everybody and their brother is going to be getting eclipse glasses. And you can find them anywhere online. This is the website of where I got mine, but literally just put in eclipse glasses. There's probably hundreds of websites now selling them. The big thing is you want enough for you and your family and friends. So don't just buy one or two. I'd buy a handful, because people who are going to be there with you may not have them. And so you want to plan in advance. I mean, they cost like a buck or two each. So they're very inexpensive. They're made out of paper, but they last. I mean, they'll do the trick very well. So that you just want to plan ahead. And this is not another solar eclipse. I mean, solar eclipses are always interesting, but this one's special for a bunch of very reasons. And the first is because of the timing. The timing is interesting. This happens to be the first day of Teshuvah. And Teshuvah is a Jewish time. It's a time of 40 days. It's a 40-day period before Yom Kippur that's meant to be a time to get your heart right with God. So Yom Kippur is 40 days after this day, and 40 days number for testing, trial and testing. Not no coincidence there. So this eclipse is the first day of Teshuvah. You then have this 40-day window when you're supposed to be getting your heart right for Yom Kippur, which is 40 days down the road. So what are the odds that this eclipse is going to happen on the first day of Teshuvah? Oh, it gets better. So could this be judgment for the USA? Could this be, again, solar eclipses are bad for the nations? Is it God telling us that we need to get our act together because interesting things are about to happen? I don't know. And it only touches the United States. No other nation that has the path of totality going through it. Like I say, you can see it from Mexico, the partial shadow. You can see it from Canada, the partial shadow, but the shadow is only going to touch the United States. So first, the Teshuvah, time of repentance and turning your hearts back to God, is God trying to tell us something. And so again, solar eclipses are bad for the nations. Lunar eclipses are bad for Israel. So is something big and bad going to happen to this nation? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But wait, it gets better, because there's one more small detail that I haven't told you. One more coincidence that is almost unbelievable. And that is this. As you look from Earth out at the eclipse, it's not just 3 things that line up exactly, but there's 4 things that line up exactly. So there has to be the Earth, there has to be the moon, and there has to be the sun. And they have to line up exactly, because if the moon doesn't completely cover the sun, it's not a total eclipse. Even if the moon is, the moon's orbit is not exactly circular, it's more oval. So if the moon is closer or farther away from the sun, you may not get a total eclipse. You may get what's called an annular eclipse, where the whole sun is not blocked out. It just so happens this time the moon's perfectly aligned for a complete total eclipse. But guess what? There's one more thing that's completely aligned, and it just blew my mind when I saw this on my star chart. And I don't think anyone has said this, before this time. But of all the things that could be aligned beyond the 3 things that need to be aligned, there's a 4th thing that's exactly in alignment with the other 3. And guess what that is? That is the heart of Leo the lion, the star Regulus. I mean, what are the odds of all the places this could happen in the sky? It's going to happen when the sun is right over Regulus, the moon is right over Regulus, and the earth is right over Regulus. Again, is God trying to tell us something? Is this a coincidence? How can you say this stuff is coincidence when so many things are lining up? It just can't possibly be coincidence. All right, so we have not even scratched the surface of coincidence. So I'm going to show you now that, right, so this was Teshuvah, the start of Teshuvah. This was August 21st, 2017. And again, make your plans now. 30 days later is Rosh Hashanah. So from August 21st to sunset on September 20th is 30 days. So and remember now, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur is 10 days. So 30 days from Teshuvah to Rosh Hashanah, 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, that adds up to the 40 days of Teshuvah. So it's no coincidence. This eclipse is going to occur 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. But look what's going to happen on this Rosh Hashanah. It's amazing. So Rosh Hashanah is the 20th, sunset on the 20th to the sunset on the 22nd. It's 2 days. Remember, it's the hidden day. It's the feast day. No one knows the date or hour. The last trump is going to occur on that sunset somewhere on Earth in some time zone. There's going to be what's called the last trump. The last time the shofar is blown on that day is going to be at sunset, on that day, on the sunset of the 22nd of September. And so is it Jerusalem? Again, like I said, is it the last fragment of the last time zone? God is very dramatic that way. He loves to do stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me. Nothing like that's going to surprise me. Now, and it could be that none of this is going to occur in any way, shape, or form in the way I give it. That's a total, totally could happen that none of this is going to happen in the way I'm telling it. And if not, we just got a better picture of what may happen in the future. We may have years yet to go. I'm okay with that. I'm just giving you for what it looks like now and how I see it. So I'm not saying all this is going to happen now. I'm just saying the coincidences are more interesting than ever before. There's lots of people who set dates, but they set it based on when Israel became a nation, when King Isaiah did this, or Isaiah did this, or King Solomon did that. There's a lot of dates about things that happen on earth that can be fudged, but things happening in the sky, you can't fudge that. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. All right, so on sunset on the 22nd starts the day of the 23rd. So the day after Rosh Hashanah starts at sunset on the 22nd. Remember, their new day starts at sunset. So sunset ends the 22nd. Sunset starts the day of the 23rd. And that happens to be the day of the great sign. Sunset on September 22nd is going to be a sunset like no other, because that is the time of the great sign. And so now we're going to spend some time and talk about Virgo in this time frame in September of 2017. And so to refresh your memory about what the great sign is, we got to go to the book of Revelation. So this is Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And it says, and a great sign. Now again, I'm not making up the words used here. God is trying to get our attention. This is just what it says. And a great sign was seen in the heaven. Again, we can't make this up. We're not fudging this. Mankind doesn't have influence on this. A great sign was seen in the heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was pregnant and crying out, having birth pains and the struggle of giving birth. So she's in the heavens, clothed in the sun, the moon at her feet, a crown of 12 stars at her head. She's pregnant, in labor, crying out, and struggling to give birth, about to give birth. And so for years, and if you read books about, the book of Revelation, anything other than what's been written lately, everyone says this is figurative, because you can't have a constellation that's pregnant or gets a crown or, you just, a constellation in labor. Come on, give me a break. It's got to be figurative. It couldn't be literal. And everyone thought that until a few years ago, when everyone discovered, oh my gosh, this is really very amazing. So let's look at the components of this picture. So if this picture were to happen in heaven, what are the components we need, and how rare, unusual would they be to have these components happen? So let's first look at the sun in Virgo. And the sun is in Virgo every fall. Remember, the sun goes around the constellations. It's in every constellation every month. The sun spends Jupiter spends a year in each constellation, but the sun spends a month in each constellation. Virtually, the sun is going around the zodiac. And when the sun is in Virgo, that means when the sun sets, you can see half of Virgo on one side. When the sun rises, you can see the other half of Virgo on the other side. So the sun is in the constellation Virgo. That is, mid-August, end of August, September, beginning of October. So that is Virgo. That is the sun in Virgo. So it's why people born in September, October have the sign of Virgo. So that happens every month. So clothed in the sun every month or every year, late in the summer, early fall. So that's not rare at all. It happens every year. And so the great sign again. Now, so what about the moon under her feet? That happens every month. The moon literally zooms around the whole sky in a month's time. That's why the phases change every month, because the moon is going much faster around the earth than the sun or the stars. And literally the moon at some point during the month is at the feet of Virgo. And so it just happens every month. So that's not rare at all. So there's nothing exceptional about that. But here's what's missing. So Virgo being pregnant and in labor, about to give birth, that's ridiculous. And a crown of 12 stars at her head. I mean, there's no crown at all at the head of Virgo, let alone a crown of 12 stars. So those are the things where you just go, what? I mean, Virgo being pregnant, how can that happen? It just can't be. Well, as we've seen, and as I've tipped my hand already, on my birthday this year, Jupiter enters the 4-star box that is the abdomen of Virgo. So Jupiter breaks the plane of that box on November 20th. And guess what? For 9 months, through retrograde motion, Jupiter stays inside that box. Now, retrograde motion is not rare. Happens every month. Some planet is going backwards from our perspective, so retrograde motion is not a rare thing. But a retrograde motion that keeps you inside some little pattern of stars is very unusual. So for 9 months, again, that time is very unusual. 9 months is the length of a human gestation. So for 9 months, Jupiter enters that box, and through retrograde motion, you can get any good star program. There's several to be had. I use one called Star Walk. I'm not saying that's good or bad. There's a lot of newer versions since I've gotten mine, and so can use other ones as well. Sky Safari is a really good one for looking at the stars, but they're all the same now. You go back and forth thousands of years, but you can see this clearly. Just put it on fast forward. Jupiter stays within the box for 9 months, and at the 9-month interval begins to be birthed. And so 1, Virgo can get pregnant, and 2, she can definitely go into labor as that planet starts to come down. So retrograde motion, Jupiter stays inside the box for the length of a human gestation, 9 months. Okay, so the second problem we have is the crown of 12 stars. There's no crown on her head at all, certainly not one of 12 stars. And how are we going to make that a reality? So what we see is that there is a constellation at her head. That's Leo the lion. Leo and Virgo are next to each other in the zodiac. There's no moving of them. The head of Virgo is near the tail of Leo. That's the way that God set it up. That's the way they stay. There's no motion there. And Leo the lion has 9 primary stars. So the stars you can see with the naked eye, there's 9. And so technically you could say, all right, there's a crown at her head, but it only has 9 stars because there's only 9 really visible stars from Leo. So again, that's not enough. And we are 3 stars short. And so we have a crown, if you want to call it that. It's only got 9 stars. We need 3 stars more. So we need somehow to figure out how to get 3 more stars into the mix. And if you look at this now, you can see the constellation. Let's see if my little zoomer goes in there. It doesn't. Okay, but you can count them. There's 9 stars that make up that constellation. And again, it's 3 stars short. So something very interesting is going to happen. And I will show you this now. We'll sort of put it together. I'm saving the 3 stars for the end. So on the first day of Teshuvah, which is August 21st, 2017, there's going to be a solar eclipse. And on that day of the solar eclipse, so remember now, this is essentially August 20th. Remember that Jupiter entered the abdomen on November 20th. So guess how many months are from November 20th to August, essentially August 20th, August 21st. Guess how many months that is? That's 9 months. And on this day of the great eclipse, Jupiter is beginning to descend out of the abdomen of Virgo. So on the day of the great eclipse, and I'm just calling it that, it's not called that in the Bible, this Virgo is the great sign on the sunset of September 23rd, but on the day of the eclipse of August, labor pains have begun. And Jupiter begins to descend out of the abdomen of Virgo. Now, it's going to take many weeks for this to occur because Jupiter moves very slowly. So it's going to take many weeks. But on this eclipse day, you can say that definitely for the first time, Jupiter is moving in a downward motion and it won't change. The retrograde motion is done. Now it's only descending. So, now think about this. The same way that Jesus was put, so the seed for Jesus was put into Mary from above, says that the shadow of the Almighty overshadowed her, and somehow he implanted seed in Mary's womb. It came from above. The same way Jupiter came from above in Virgo, entered the abdomen, and 9 months later, the same way the Messiah left Mary through the birth canal, Jupiter is going to leave through the birth canal of Virgo. So again, the patterns are unmistakable. So by the eclipse of August 2017, the birth pains have begun. Jupiter is in labor and about to give birth. So 30 days later is Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah starts at sunset on September 20th. It's a 2-day feast, a lot of trumpet blowing. Someday on the last day, sunset of 22nd of September is the last trump. And Jupiter this whole time is continuing to descend through the birth canal. So the whole time of these 30 days, the whole time of Rosh Hashanah, Jupiter is descending in the sky through the birth canal. So the next day at sunset on September 23rd, something amazing is going to appear in the sky, and that is this. On the day after Rosh Hashanah, these things have occurred. So Virgo's clothed in the sun. It's still September. The sun has been in Virgo, just like it's in Virgo now because we're in, mid-October. This is still, Virgo, what we're in this year. So next year, at the time of this sign, sun's going to be in Virgo. So that just means it's the fall. The moon is going to be at her feet. Now remember, the moon zooms around the sky very quickly. So for the moon to be at her feet only occurs in a few hours. So this is a very time-limited sign. Jupiter moves slowly, the planets move relatively slowly, the sun takes a whole month to get through, but the moon is only going to be at her feet for a few hours, and then it'll be gone. It'll be above her feet, and that's not the sign. It'll be just below her feet, that's the sign. And as soon as it moves away from her feet, the sign is over. God has very specifically put the time frame of this sign using the moon, which zooms around the sky. And on this night, so on the sunset of that evening, the moon is at the feet of Virgo. So we got that going for us. And as we've seen, she's been in labor. She's been pregnant for 9 months. She's now in labor, and Jupiter's descending down the birth canal. The labor pains have been going on for at least 30 days from the eclipse. And now birth is imminent. I mean, you only have labor for so many time, and then the baby's coming. And I believe at the sign that this is happening on this evening, the baby is arriving. And whatever that means, I don't know. But for the first time, the baby is coming out between her legs and is no longer in the birth canal. Now, here's the part we haven't addressed yet, and that is the crown of 12 stars at her head. Because this is also very time limited. It's not going to move as quickly as the moon, but within a few hours of this occurring, a few hours before it hasn't occurred, a few hours after this, it's over. So for a few hours, this pattern is going to occur. And that is the stars are going to line up in a very specific way in the constellation of Leo at the head of Virgo. So you got the 9 brightest stars of Leo, and it just so happens the planets of Mercury, Mars, and Venus are going to line up, and by the way, with the planet Regulus, in all equally spaced. So there's not like this weird cluster that just is a hodgepodge of planets. It's Regulus, Venus, Mars, Mercury, Virgo. And they're exactly spaced apart. There's no one closer to the other. It's nothing like that. The coincidence is unbelievable. Now I'm going to show you this on Sky Safari, and I hope it comes through. But here's the picture. So this is Virgo, the woman. Leo, the lion, is at her head. Leo doesn't move. Leo and Virgo don't move. This is where they stay, and they've stayed through all time. You can see at the feet of Virgo is the moon. And I hope this is coming through all right for you. But the moon is at her feet. Like I say, this is only a few hours that this is going to occur like this. God was when he gave this sign, he said there's no mistaking when this occurs. It's not going to occur again, even within a few hours before and after. This is it. So the moon is at her feet. Right by the head of Virgo, you can see the sun. That just means the sun is in Virgo. That just means the time of year. You can see the 4-star box in her abdomen. It's shaped like a diamond. You can see Jupiter now is clearly out of the box. So Jupiter is clearly between her legs now. The birth has taken place. Labor's over. Whatever's happening is happening. Now, so look at Leo again. Leo is made of 9 principal stars. And you can see Regulus. Regulus is the star all the way to the right of your picture. It says Regulus if you can read it. And right below Regulus, now look at the even spacing of this, is Venus, Mars, Mercury, and then the head of Virgo. Very evenly spaced. And if you, like I say, you go ahead a few hours, it's gone. You go back a few hours, it's gone. This perspective is only going to occur for a very brief period of time. Now, here's something I added since I talked to you in September, or if you've heard this before, this is brand new. And this was brought to my attention by a website or a YouTube I just watched in the last day or two. That's why I say knowledge is increasing. This stuff is unbelievable what's coming out now. So I showed this slide in September and I said, is this rare? Has this happened before? And if you remember, my answer was no. And now my answer is yes. This has occurred before. Because we know the pattern now we can go into the past and say, has this ever happened before? And the answer is yes. The trouble I had before is I didn't go back far enough. I went back to the time of Jesus' birth. But you know what? That wasn't far enough. I had to go back to creation, the beginning of creation. And this picture shows up right after the creation. And so now I'm going to show you this picture. It's a little bit different, but essentially the same. Again, it happened in just a few hours. A few hours before this, it wasn't available, couldn't see it. A few hours after, it couldn't see it. But it happens at a very interesting time, and I've not made sense of the time yet. So it's the exact picture. It's got one small change. It happens in 3915 BC. We'd say BCE, before Common Era. That's all. It was always called before Christ, but you got to take Christ out of things now. So 3915, and you'd say, well, if creation was 4000 BC, what was 3915? And to be honest, I'm not sure. And so I see this sign happen, but I have not quite put it together. And was it, the time that God gave the promise in Genesis 3:15? Was it the time when Cain and Abel lived and Cain slew Abel? I don't know. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but it's unmistakable that God has pointed this out to us and said, hey, look up, there's something going on here. So here's the difference, and I'm going to show you the picture of the difference next slide. The difference is Saturn is now in the mix of the 3 stars that make up the crown at her head. So instead of Mars, it's Saturn. Now keep in mind, Saturn is the picture of the devil to me. And so was this at a time before the devil fell? I don't know. And the devil was part of God's household? I don't know. Was this a time when Mars is important now because war is the emphasis now and war was not the emphasis then? I don't know, but I will say this. There is something to it. There's exactly something to it, and it's there for us to glean out. And I'm sure your mind is racing now the way mine is, but there's a lot to this, and it's our job to pick it out. God has shown us, this has been hidden until now, but God is showing us this pattern, and it's up to us to figure out what the perspective is, because that's going to unlock bigger things yet. So what's the timing? Is it the timing that it was 39:15? Was that when Adam and Eve fell and God said, look, I'm sending a Messiah, and here's the picture of his picture. This is his picture in the heavens. Is it the time when Cain killed Abel, which is 85 years after creation? I don't know. Is it the day of creation? I don't know. I don't know what the perspective is. But here's the picture. So it's the same thing. It's from my Sky Safari 4. And again, the pattern is exactly the same, except Regulus, which is now in the top right corner. This next planet is Saturn, whereas before it was Venus. The next planet now is Venus, and where it was before it was Mars. And then the last planet is Mercury, and Mercury was the same in both. So the stars, the planets are a little bit rearranged, but she's clothed in the sun, a crown of 12 stars at her head. Jupiter has been in her abdomen for 9 months and is just now breaking the plane of the box. It's exactly the same. It's the exact same thing, and the moon is right at her feet. So this is August 5th, 3915 BC. The exact, and it happened the same way. Jupiter entered 9 months early. It all came. It's all in the fall, just like it happened. I'm sure this is the day after Rosh Hashanah, just like it's shown now. The feasts are the same, the pattern's the same. We just need to figure out what he's trying to tell us, because something big happened on that day the way something big is about to happen in the future. So now back to 2017. Now we have a problem here. Actually, we have two problems here. All right, among the problems we have here, one is, if this is the great sign of Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and Revelation chapter 1 or chapter 12 happens in the middle of the book of Revelation, then we have a problem. We've got a sign that's occurring next year, which according to the book of Revelation occurs in the middle of the book of Revelation. Then shouldn't we be in the tribulation now? In other words, if next Rosh Hashanah, next September 23rd, 2017, if that's the middle of the book, shouldn't we now be in the middle of the book of Revelation, which means right now we should be in the tribulation period? Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see the tribulation going on around us right now. And I do not believe we are in the book of tribulation. And I've always had a problem with that. And this has not been a problem that I've had, but this has been a bugaboo of many. In fact, the guys who have seen the blood red moons, those blood red moons are 1,260 days before this day next year. Now, does the number 1,260 mean anything to you? The 1,260 days and all these new numerical patterns that show up in the book of Revelation have shown up from the blood red moons until this star sign next year. And so people writing about the blood red moons before they happen, we're saying the first blood red moon is going to be the gathering together and the start of the book of tribulation. Now, I don't believe that happened. And I don't believe we're in the middle of the book of tribulation. I don't believe anything going on around us now is anything to do with the tribulation. But I had trouble reconciling these two things. How the sign, this great sign, not just a sign, but the great sign was in the middle of the book of tribulation, and yet we should be in the middle of the book of tribulation if Revelations is chronological. And if the book of Revelation is not chronological, then we got room to work. And I'm going to show you that the book of Revelations, at least in this instance, is not chronological. And I was reading, so E.W. Bullinger died in 1913. So E.W. Bullinger did all his greatest writings from about 1890 to about 1905 or so. He wrote a lot of books between 1890 and 1905, including Witness of the Stars, Numbers in Scripture, his book on Revelation. All those came out in this time frame. He was writing about this before there was any inkling of what was going on in the heavens. And he wrote something that as I read it, I was getting goosebumps because I almost couldn't believe what I was reading. It was the answer to what I've been looking for all this time. And you remember, Bullinger is all about figures of speech. And so we're going to read something from, this is his book on commentary and revelation. It's a huge book. It's like 600, 700 pages. It's very big. But he's got a lot of really good stuff in there because he did not look through the blinders of tradition. He looked at what the Bible was saying. He was big on figures of speech. Hardly anyone else was getting that the way he was. And he showed this part of Revelation and the figure of speech that it is. And so I'm going to show you now. So this is from page 385. Again, this was written in 1902. We're only now starting to see the significance of this, but it was written a long, long time ago. So this is a chapter, and he's writing about the section in the book of Revelation that's about chapters 12 to 15. So the section of the book, he's writing about Revelation 12 to 15. And he says this section of the book of Revelation is an example of the figure of speech hysterologia, or hysterologia. And hysterologia is this. Hysteros, and this is from his book, Figures of Speech Used in the Bible. And he actually explains this in his book on Revelation as well. But I got this from his Figures of Speech book. Hysteros means last. Logos means speech or word. And so literally, hysterologia means the first of two things being put last. Another way to say it is it's a figure of speech by which that which is put last ought, according to the usual order, come first. And I was getting awesome goosebumps while I was reading this because here's what he's saying. He's saying that this section in Revelation chapter 12 and even the stuff after this, it's parenthetical. In other words, he's explaining something later in the book that actually occurred earlier in the book. So he's saying, oh, by the way, in this parentheses, this sign that I'm telling you about now occurred before chapter 6. So it's a parenthesis. It's something written about later that by all rights should have come chronologically before now. And so he's writing that what occurs in chapter 12 happened before chapter 6. And I thought, holy cats. That's saying that what we're reading about now, this prophetic record of the great sign, actually takes place at the beginning of the book of Revelation as we know it. So this great sign is not really happening in the middle of the book of Revelation. It's actually taking place before chapter 6 and running parallel. So these chapters 12 through 15 are an account that's running parallel with chapters 6 through 11. And if you read in his book, he details it, and it's quite illuminating. So this really opened up my eyes because this sign is a prelude, if you will. It's the true great sign, yes, and it is actually happening at the beginning of the tribulation. And so to me, it's been the answer for why people have said, well, we should be in the tribulation now if the sign is coming, but it just doesn't make sense that I can't see it around us. And I'm saying it's because this is actually the opening shot across the bow of the world that God is saying things are about to take place. So is this the great sign? Is this the beginning of the tribulation? And I got to preface this with, I don't know. I mean, what else don't we know? What else haven't we seen? What else are we missing? What else through the blinders of tradition are we not getting? So I'm going to say the patterns in the heavens are unmistakable, but exactly what God is trying to say, I don't really know. All right, now, this is stuff that came to me yesterday. So there's a PS about this. And actually, John Truitt and I talked about this the other night, but I thought more about it, and some other stuff came up. The PS is this. The postscript is this. Although this is the great sign of the opening of the tribulation, which I believe it is, it's not going to be noticed by anyone on earth. Now, those of us who are looking for it are going to go, holy cats, this is what we've been waiting for. But I believe it's going to go completely unnoticed by the vast majority of the world. And I have several reasons for saying that. And the first one is this. People don't care. People think the heavens are the zodiac and astrology, and they just don't care. They're not looking for star signs. Stars have been moving and congregating and retrograding and, conjuncting and opposing and, all that stuff forever. And it's nothing new. It's pretty. Hey, look at that. That's pretty. But they don't want to know anything else about it. They don't care to know anything else about it. They don't know anything else about it. So they're not looking for it. So the star sign, it is the great sign. There's no question about it. But people are not going to notice. So it's the great sign, but it's not going to be the great noticed sign. Now, here's the other reason why people aren't going to notice it. And I think it's the same reason they haven't noticed it in the past. And that's that, remember, the sun is in Virgo. Now, when the sun is up, how much of the stars can you see? You can't see diddly. So that means when the sun is in the middle of a star sign, you can see half at sunset, and you can see the other half at sunrise. But can you see the whole thing? Which if you saw the whole thing, you'd go, oh my gosh, look at all those planets together. That is just incredible. And the moon is there and everything. But to see half in the morning and half in the evening, you're not going to get it. You're not going to see it. You certainly aren't going to see it during the day when most people are looking for things. And people are not going to put it together. They just are not going to. Now, in retrospect, will they get it? I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think beforehand, they're not going to get it. And here's the other reason why it's not going to be noticed. Remember when I said the bad guys came together in August? That was in the sky for weeks. You could see all three. You could see the heart of the scorpion. You could see Mars moving in, and you could see Saturn. And they were bright and clear and for weeks. And they were getting closer and closer. And you couldn't help but look up and go, oh, my gosh, those things are getting closer every day. This is not like that. This is going to happen in a few hours. And so one, it's going to be in the middle of the sun. And two, in a few hours, it's gone. The moon will be gone. The planets at the head are going to move on. Jupiter's going to move out between her legs. It's going to be gone. If you don't know what's happening, you're not going to see it in the sky. So it's the great sign, yes, but I'm going to say it's the great unnoticed sign. So the people are just not going to get it. All right, now, here's the biggest problem of all. You thought those were problems? This is the biggest problem yet. And this has been a problem as soon as we figured out that Revelation 1 and 2 were literal. Because for them to be literal is just unbelievable. You had to have a constellation that was pregnant. You had to give a constellation or crown of 12 stars. She had to be giving birth, moon at her feet. I mean, just all these things had to come together. And you're like, how is that possibly going to happen? And the minute you saw it, you said, oh, isn't that interesting? Now, I'm going to strain your brain even more because what's got to happen after that is even more far-fetched. And again, if verses 1 and 2 were literal in the sky, are you going to tell me now that verses 3 and 4 are not literal in the sky? It just can't be. It's got to be. It's all part of the same explanation of what's happening in the sky as we move on to verses 3 and 4. This has got to be just as literal. And just look at what has to happen for this to be literal. It's just, I don't know how God's going to pull this off. As it happens, we'll be going, oh yeah, it's part of the red dot on our foreheads. We will totally get it then. But for us to see it now, we just can't see it. It's just too unbelievable. So let's read it. So this is verses 3 and 4. It says, another sign was seen in heaven. So this is a sign. It's in heaven. It's going to be literal. It says, and look, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems, or 7 crowns, and his tail dragged away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stands before the woman who is about to give birth in order that when she gives birth to her child, he can devour him. Okay, so we need a dragon. It's got to be red. Any red dragons in heaven? Anybody? It's got to have 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, any dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns on the 7 heads? And then it's got to drag away a third of the stars and throw them down to earth. I'm just saying, verses 1 and 2 are absolutely literal. And so we have to stretch our brain to say, man alive, what is going on that would make this all true? All right, first of all, I'll give you what we do know. So these are for sure. This is absolute. There is a dragon at the foot of the woman. There is a dragon at the foot of the woman. So we don't need to get a dragon at the foot of the woman. There's a dragon already there called serpents. Now, when you say serpents, what do you think of? You think of a snake. The Hebrew word for serpents means a dragon, or like a kimono dragon, or like a crocodile. It's got legs. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent was not a snake. The word serpent was not a snake. And now God threw him down in his belly and said, you're going to eat dust. So maybe that was the birth of snakes. But the original serpent was a dragon, something with legs. And so serpents at the feet of the woman is not a snake. It's portrayed as a snake. I guarantee that. You'll see it as a snake. But it is a dragon. That's the word, is a dragon. So we got a dragon at her feet. Is the feet the right place to be? Yes, because when she gives birth, what does the dragon want to do? Eat the baby. So if you're going to be a dragon, you're going to be in the prophecy, you got to be at the feet. So check that one off. The dragon is at the feet of the woman. Now, the other thing is there is a crown at the head of the dragon. Check that one off. And the crown is made out of 7 stars. So I'm just saying, part of it is there already. So we got a dragon, we got a crown. Now it says 7 crowns, so I don't know if that means each star is going to be a crown or what the deal is. I'm just telling you what we know already. There is a serpent, a dragon. There is a crown at the head of the dragon that has 7 stars. So this is not new. This happens every night. The same way Leo and Virgo are together, the serpents, the crown, the feet of the woman are always together. Nothing has to move. Here's what we don't know. You need a red dragon. There's nothing about the dragon that's red. And so we need to stretch our minds to think about the things that could happen in the universe. And I'm just saying this because when it happens, it will be clear. But how it happens, we have no earthly idea. And I'll give you the few ideas we think we do know. One, so again, I told you I listened to NASA and, these people who talk about earthquakes and, earthly events and events that happen in the sky. And I'm listening with a completely set of different ears. A year and a half ago, which is now about a year ago, and think about where we are in time and what's got to happen in about a year. So a year and a half ago, I heard that half a year ago, I heard that a year and a half from now, so half a year ago, I heard that a year and a half from that time, which is going to be about this time next fall, that a supernova is scheduled to occur. So there's some unstable star they think is going to supernova in this quadrant of the galaxy. So where Serpens is and where Corona is, the crown, where the woman is, they're expecting some supernova somewhere in that area of the sky. No one knows for sure. Now supernova is when a star explodes. So stars get unstable. How many of you know that? Stars get unstable. And eventually they explode. It happens more often than you think, but most of them are so far away that if you weren't looking in the right spot and you weren't looking with the telescopes, you would not see it. But supernovas happen more often than you think. But they're thinking a supernova it's thought to be occurring because this unstable star in this quadrant of space. And when it occurs, it could be so bright that it could be seen during the day. Now, supernovas, go back in history and Google this. Supernovas have occurred in the past that were so bright they were seen during the day. So the sun's up, and yet there's this bright spot in the sky. So that does happen. It also was told, and again, NASA is not thinking that they're fulfilling prophecy. It also was said that in the spectrum of light that we see this in, it's bound to look red. So could there be a supernova that makes Serpens red just at the time all this is occurring? I don't know. Let me tell you another thing that could happen. Somewhere out there is a planet that almost everyone and their brother believes is out there. There's some big giant planet that's not on the orbits of planets, but it's on the big oval orbits of comets. So, comets enter our solar system and they go out for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. And then the sun, they come in back around the gravitational pull of the sun, they go out again. And they run like clockwork. We just don't know where they are or how many of them are there out there, because if they're only coming every couple thousand years, we've never seen them. We don't know they're out there. They're awfully small. So there's things out there that run through our solar system that don't run on an orbit we can predict. Now, once we see the orbit, yes, we can predict it. But there's plenty of things out there. That's why we're always finding new comets, new asteroids. It's not that they weren't out there. It's just that we didn't know where they were until they become close enough to see. Now, they believe that there's planets out there that run in the same irregular orbits. The orbit is regular, but from our perspective, they're irregular. And the reason they predict this is that the orbits of Uranus and Neptune aren't like the orbits of everyone else. And they think there's something big out there that has such a gravitational effect that it's goofed with the orbits of the farther planets. And so for years, they've predicted there's got to be some big planet out there that we've not ever seen. So lo and behold now, they think there's this planet, some call it Planet X, some call it Nubius. There's this big planet now, which everyone and their brother is expecting to show up any day, that's on these regularly irregular orbits. And it's going to have a gravitational effect such that the planet, either one, may not survive the transit through all the gravitational forces of the sun and all the inner planets. In other words, we're exerting such gravitational effect that the planet might break up. Or something that's come up lately is that the planet is on such an orbit that it might hit one of the other planets. And the thinking is that it might hit one of the outer planets, like Uranus or Neptune, or could be Saturn, could be Jupiter. Nobody knows. But there's a chance that Nibiru, or Planet X, or it's got other names too, you can look it up, you'll see other names for it. If it hits another planet, or if it breaks up in the nearby space that we're orbiting in, you can see where this is going to make likely some of the events that it talks about in the book of Revelation. If you get this huge debris field, for whatever reason, maybe it's coming with its own debris field, you could have 100-pound hailstones coming through our orbit, and all these and the stars falling, third of the stars get swept out of the earth. That could be portrayed by whatever's going to happen with this huge planet, if that's the way it's portrayed. But you could get 100-pound hailstones with all the meteorites coming in from the debris field from either a collision or a near orbit. It talks about earthquakes and, the sea turning red and great fearful signs in the heaven and the earth. I mean, the great fearful signs in heaven are not what's going to happen next September. Again, most people are not even going to notice it. But in Revelations, it talks about the sun turning black, the earth turning to blood. I mean, those are real signs where people are going to look at 100-pound hailstones. Believe me, you start getting 100-pound hailstones falling from the sky, they're going to say something's going. It talks about the heaven and the earth being shaken. That's something much bigger than we're going to see in the next few months. Something really big is going to happen. And in the happening of that, whatever it needs to take to make serpents red is going to occur because of that. Whatever the heads appearing and more crowns and stars and all that, whatever is going on then. Now, it could be phenomena. Could it be phenomena? Yes. But the first verses, 1 and 2, are not phenomena. So this could be phenomena, but I'm going to say something's going to happen in the sky to make serpents red, to give you all the heads and crowns and everything you need to where people look up and go, oh my gosh, that's Revelation 12, verses 3 and 4. So there's a lot that's going to happen. Do we know exactly how it's going to happen? No, we don't. I'm just giving you a few things you can think of, and think of other things, because as things come up in the news and you hear something with God's ears, you're going to go, oh, yes, I see now how that's going to happen. So supernova, I don't know. Nibiru, I don't know. But somehow we need a bunch more heads. We need a bunch more horns. We need a bunch more crowns. And then he's going to be thrown down. He's got to drag a bunch of stars to heaven. He's going to be thrown down to heaven. All that's got to happen. How it's going to happen, I don't know. Hey, I just said that. I don't know. Okay. Now, I will say this. So we're looking now at things that are going to happen in the sky. So we've seen the eclipse. We've gone through Rosh Hashanah. We've entered the days of awe. Okay. When that star sign actually occurs, it's the day after, it's the moment after the last trump. So that evening when the sun sets on September 22nd and begins September 23rd, that evening when the sun sets, you'll see half the great sign. It'll be sticking out into space. You'll see Jupiter at her feet, and you'll see the moon Jupiter coming down the birth canal, the moon at her feet. Then the next morning, you'll see the other half. You'll see Leo the lion, Regulus, Venus, Mars, Mercury, and then the next day it's all gone. If you don't see it that evening and you don't see the other half that morning, you missed it. So you can only see half in the evening, half in the morning, and after that it's gone. So it is a sign. It is the great sign, but I don't think it's the heaven shaken and all the things that are going to be seen after that. So, but this does happen. So right after that sign, it says the dragon does all his things. He attempts to devour the child. He's thrown down to earth. He takes a bunch of stars with him. And then look what it says. So this is Revelation chapter 12 still. So we've done verses 1 and 2. We've done verses 3 or 4. Now this is verse 7. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to see it happen in the sky. So it says, this is verse 7. It says, and there was a war in heaven. Now heavens, we can see things going on in heavens. We saw the woman, we saw the dragon, however that's going to look. Now we're going to see this war in heaven. It's up there. So it says there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels. Now what does that sound like to you? When I read that, it sounds like this back and forth battle that's going to take some time. So one, Michael fights against the dragon. You know, it looks like Michael's winning, maybe the dragon's winning. And then the dragon fights against Michael. Looks like the dragon's winning, looks like Michael's winning. So one, it's going to take time. Two, it's going to go back and forth. I'm just reading that the way it says. And verse 8 says, and the dragon, context is the dragon prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. So there's this battle. It's Michael, it's the dragon. Okay? Goes back and forth, and neither more is their place found in heaven. It says, therefore rejoice, you heavens. So the heavens are happy. Dragon's thrown down. No more dragon accusing the brethren before the throne of God. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe unto you, inhabitants of the earth. Now, I'm saying we're gone by now, because this is when it really gets nasty. So woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that he hath but a short time. So there's a war in heaven. The devil's thrown down. Heaven's happy, and that's where we'll be. So it's great. And earth, though, is going to enter into the worst time, the worst 7 years known to man. It's going to be just really awful. Again, if God didn't shorten the time, all people would be destroyed. So now let's think about this. So we've seen the woman in the sky. Right after that, something's going to happen to the dragon in the sky. We don't know what. So next, there's got to be something about this war. And now keep in mind, who are the two participants in the war? The dragon, who is Saturn, and Michael, who is Mercury. Now, if only there were something where Mercury and Saturn had this back and forth motion right after these other signs, that would really be something, wouldn't it? Well, it just so happens that on December 6th, 2017, so this is like 2 months, October, November, a little over 2 months, that Mercury and Saturn tangle in the sky. So Mercury approaches and comes right over Saturn, but in the sky, without overtaking Saturn, Mercury retreats. So there's this quick motion to Saturn, and then there's a quick retreat over Saturn. So is that the day that the war in heaven begins? I don't know. But December 6, 2017 could be interesting. A few days later, January 12th, 2018, Mercury and Saturn tangle again. And again, Mercury comes right over Saturn, but this time Mercury moves on and leaves Saturn behind. So does the war in heaven begin on December 6th? And the dragon thrown down on January 12th? I don't know, but the picture is there, and it occurs in the right time frame. So, interesting to say, but we'll just have to, we'll have a great perspective from this one day, but we don't know. I'm just saying it's out there. Now, it just so happens that at the precise moment this war takes place between Mercury and Saturn, Saturn enters Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, if any of you are born in Sagittarius, or are Sagittarius, your zodiac sign, is the archer. So the archer is very important because in Revelation chapter 6, continuing our current, the events as they all unfold in the book of Revelation, says this. So this is very early on in the book of Revelation. It says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice of thunder, come. And I saw, and look, a white horse, and the one who sat on it had a bow. Again, that's an archer. And there was given unto him a crown, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Now, few things you need to notice here. One is, to pick up the narrative, we went back to Revelation chapter 6. Again, Hystrologia. We've seen the sign in Revelation 12, but it heralds the beginning of what's going on in Revelation chapter 6. So you can't take this as written as chronology. You've got to see things are happening in heaven, things are happening on earth, and they're written about separately, but you need to correlate them because they overlap. They're not going in a set timeline. And that's the biggest thing that Bollinger shows in his book on Revelation is you have two theaters. And unless you reconcile the two theaters, because there's stuff going on in heaven, there's stuff going on earth, they're written about separately, but we have to see how they fit together. Again, God is hiding it. It's the glory of kings to search it out. Not that we're kings, but we're getting there. So again, we went back to Revelation chapter 6. We pick up the beginning of the narrative of what's going on earth, and we see a rider coming with a bow. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's people, if you read stuff about the book of Revelation, they'll say, oh, this is the Messiah coming on his white horse, given a crown to conquer and conquering and to conquer. That's not true at all. This is a counterfeit. This is Satan. Now, keep in mind, Saturn just entered Sagittarius, who's the archer. Satan on earth is spiritually going forth through his evil minions or whatever. He's going forth as a counterfeit warrior on a white horse. Now, who is he counterfeiting? But the Messiah, who's going to come at the end, ride from heaven on a white horse with us, by the way, at the time of the Battle of Armageddon. And we are going to clean up at the end of the book of Revelation. But this is a counterfeit. This is satanic forces coming on a white horse with a crown, and the conquering is going to be God's people. So this is bringing death and pestilence. You'll see the other horse riders, they're bringing all the bad stuff. This is bad stuff. And this is Saturn entering Sagittarius is when this is going to begin. And it's happening right at the time that Satan was thrown down to earth. Satan's thrown down to earth, he enters Sagittarius, and all this bad stuff starts to happen. So this is counterfeit signs, and the tribulation is beginning in earnest on the earth. So now Saturn, remember Saturn moves very slowly? Saturn's going to be in Sagittarius for 2.5 years. That's, so we're looking at the whole first part of the 3.5 year window. So time is going by. And so when the next sign that Saturn's going to enter is Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is a very strange sign, a zodiac. The zodiac sign of Capricorn is very strange. It's half goat, half fish. Now, you can say half goat. Now, goat is always portrayed as, in Satan and, ritualistic masses and all that. Goats are always a bad thing, always a picture of Satan. So half goat, half fish. And this has got to keep in mind now, the time this is happening is getting to be the second half of the tribulation. So it's Capricorn, half goat, half fish. Is it a picture of the Antichrist being portrayed as the beast and rising out of the sea of humanity? Half fish would be the sea and the fish. The humanity is considered the sea in the book of Revelation. I saw beasts coming out of the sea, saw false prophet coming out of the sea, which means coming out of humanity. And so this half goat, half fish, is it the time when the beast is really coming to power? And the half goat thing, is this the start of the second half of the tribulation when Satan indwells the Antichrist? They talk about the first half of the tribulation maybe not being so bad as the second half, and maybe during the second half, the Antichrist actually is possessed, physically, mentally, spiritually by the Antichrist. And is this a picture of that? By Satan? I don't know. But it just so happens the timing is interesting. So it's very, very interesting picture. All right, so now we're going to enter a time when some even more interesting things happen in heaven. And for the next several months, starting around March of 2020, again, this is just at the start of the second half of tribulation. And also this is around the first of Nisan, which is also significant for the feasts of Israel. So there's also a feast picture, which I've not fully explored. So I'm telling you what's going on in the sky, but there's a whole other side of this, and that's we need to correlate this more with the feast of God because I'll see more. So I've not really had the time to do that, but I'm going to look at the dates and times of this more in relation to the feast. But around this time in 2020, there begins to be a multi-month battle between Jupiter and Saturn. So Jupiter and Saturn begin this retrograde fighting match or they're going back and forth against each other that last for several months. And so what is that a picture of what's going on Earth? I'm sure it's not going to be pretty, but it's during the worst part of the tribulation. And the reason I know this is something is because of this. And that's the first time when they approach for the first time, just as they reach each other, Mars appears directly between them. So otherwise you just say it's two planets interloping and all that. But it just so happens when they meet for the first time, the planet that is exactly right between them at that instant is Mars. So Saturn moves very slowly. Jupiter moves a little more quickly. Mars moves more quickly yet. And yet when they three come together, there's a small gap yet between Saturn and Jupiter, and Mars is exactly in that gap. And again, you got to say, I mean, come on, the timing, the coincidence. I mean, I can't believe this is coincidence. I got to believe this is telling us something. And so, and if this is around the 1st of Nisan, this correlates with the beginning of, Passover and first fruits. And again, the feast days are correlating with all this. So there's a lot out there to see. So starting in March 2020, this back and forth battle begins. It goes all the way till January of 2021. So this is a several month, struggle between Jupiter and Saturn. And when it ends in a very dramatic way. When the battle ends, Jupiter crosses not for the first time, but for the final time, Jupiter crosses over Saturn. And then everything else in the sky goes by in order. And to me, it looks like they're all thumbing their nose at Satan. And they go by over them. So this is on January 1st. Jupiter finally passes for the last time for a long, long time. Because remember, Saturn goes very slowly around the sky. So it's not till 2040 or something that you get these, well, it's not quite that far, but it's a long time before these two wrestle again. But on January 10th, Mercury passes over Saturn. The 14th, the moon passes over. The 24th, the sun passes over. February 16th, Venus passes over Saturn. And to me, they're all going like, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it looks great in my mind picture. So I'm just saying that happens. And the only planet that doesn't pass over is Mars, because Mars has just gone by, as you remember. And so Mars doesn't pass over. And I don't know what the meaning of that is, but I'm sure there is a meaning about that. Could it mean Satan's finally defeated all but, a little bit of time to go by and, wrap them up? I don't know. But it's very interesting. And this is at the exact point of the mid-trib point. So this is exactly 3.5 years from the great sign that this happens. So I'm just saying. All right, now, if you thought it couldn't get more interesting, you were totally wrong. Because, again, we are just scratching the surface of what's going to happen in the next few years. And some of this you almost can't believe. And this one, I almost couldn't believe it till I saw it on nasa.gov. NASA does not lie. So this was on nasa.gov, and all the pictures I'm going to show you are right from their website. So now April 18th is the 1st of Nisan in 2024. So it's the pattern is unmistakable. This could have happened any month, but it happened on the 1st of Nisan, 2024. It's a second great solar eclipse. So, and how many years later? 7 years later. Does that mean anything to anybody? I don't know. So 7 years later, there's going to be a second great solar eclipse. It's going to cross through North America. Now, this one's a little different. This one's going to touch Canada and Mexico, but it's going to go right through, again, the heart of the United States. And if you live in Carbondale, Illinois, or maybe you should move to Carbondale, Illinois, because Carbondale, Illinois is going to see both eclipses without having to leave their living room. In fact, now Carbondale, Illinois is calling itself the Eclipse Crossroads of America. They even have T-shirts. And if you go online, you can get yourself one. And I also found it interesting. So that, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, what is it about Carbondale, Illinois? Is they like, the satanic center of the United States? And sorry, Carbondale, I didn't mean that. But I will say this, that if you look up Carbondale, Illinois online, it's called Little Egypt. It didn't have to be called Little Egypt. It's called Little Egypt because the architecture, the climate, the marshiness of Carbondale, Illinois is so when the settlers got to Carbondale, Illinois, they said, well, this is just like Egypt. And it's called Little Egypt. Now, is there something to that? I don't know. But it just amazed me when I found that. All right, so now, 7 years between the two. The first eclipse started labor pains and really was the beginning of this start of the tribulation. So this one occurs not quite 7 years later, but almost 7 years later. And is this the end, heralding the end, the wrap-up of the tribulation? I don't know. But the timing is amazing. And look at this. This is the picture of what it's going to look like. I mean, you know, you can't make this stuff up. And this is from NASA.gov. They didn't make this stuff up. And so the good news is if we're still on Earth, I don't have to travel all the way to Paducah, Kentucky to get in the shadow. I can just go to the edge of Toledo, Ohio. I don't have to travel nearly as far this time. But so there's actually going to be two eclipses, 7 years apart, both on important days. First of Teshuvah in this next summer, first of Nisan 7 years later. I mean, they're correlating with the feast days, the pattern across the United States. Does that mean we need to be worried about all this stuff? I don't know. But there's something there that's definitely unbelievable.
Hey, Gary.
Yes.
There's a lake just south of Carbondale called Devil's Kitchen Lake. And there's a whole bunch of different things all around that. The devil's this and the devil's that, all in that whole area. I don't know if that means anything, but it's funny.
Well, it's clear there's no coincidence. I mean, there's definitely something more for us to see. But if that's it, I don't know. So maybe if you live in Carbondale, Illinois, maybe you should move. I don't know why, but maybe there's going to be some big earthquake there or something. I don't know. This could be just to get your attention, Carbondale. Just saying. Okay, now we're getting to the end of this, and you're all going, thank goodness for that. But there's one more thing. Actually, there's two more things. Among the things that are still important is this, and that is if the tribulation started. And again, this is all part of the patterns and the symmetry of God. If we're saying the tribulation started in 2017, and I'm not, but if it did, then there has to be important star signs in 2024. Now, we've already seen there's one for sure, and that's the eclipse. I mean, that's already there. But there has to be other things that are important in the right constellations, with the right planets, that God is saying, look, I've given you the beginning, and now I'm showing you the end, so that there's no question in your mind. Now, keep this in mind, too. If it started in the fall, and if it's 7 years, and I don't make up the dates. I mean, they're talking about 1,260 days for the first half, 1,260 days for the second half, and all the dates. If it starts in the fall, and it's 7 years, it's got to end in the fall, okay? That's got to be. And so that's the time of the fall feast, too, right? Convenient. So if it starts in the fall, it's got to end in the fall. So we want to look around the time of 2024 and see if there's anything to grab our attention. And there's a bunch. So Taurus the Bull, I've not talked about Taurus yet, but Taurus the Bull is another really important constellation because, one, it's a bull. It's a picture of the Messiah, but the attributes of the Messiah is as the judge of the whole earth. And Taurus the Bull is the picture of the Messiah as the king of the whole earth, because do bulls give in to things? Can you reason with a bull? Can you coax a bull down from what the bull knows is right? It says that the Messiah is going to rule the earth with a rod of scepter. With a scepter made of iron, rod made of iron. Does any of that sound loving to you? The answer is yes. The rod of iron is wielded in love to get evil off the earth so that the people who are loving, who love love, can live a life without turmoil. So yes, the bull is loving because the bull's not going to take any guff, and whatever's wrong is going to get pushed by the horns of the bull off the face of the earth. So Taurus the bull is a picture of the coming judge and the Lord of all the earth. Now I'm going to show you something else. I did not make this up. But in looking up Taurus, because the next important sign is going to be in Taurus. So looking up Taurus, I learned a couple of very interesting things, and this is one of them. The Egyptian zodiac in Arabic has a name for Taurus, and it's Isis. Taurus, the bull, in the Arabic language, in the zodiac, is called Isis. And Isis means one who saves or delivers in the Arabic language. That's what Isis means. And so even that, it means they're a prophetic sign even in that. And you're going to see, this is the other thing about Bullinger writing about his witness of the stars. He gives the Hebrew words for certain stars, and lots of them, and the Arabic word for certain stars, like Spica and Samach, one's Arabic, one's Hebrew. They both have different meanings, but they both have attributes of the Messiah. Spica and Samach mean different things, but they all are facets of the Messiah. So even this word Isis, one who saves and delivers, even though we'd say Isis, oh my gosh, it's a horrible word. It's not. It's a prophetic picture of the Messiah. We just use it in the wrong way now. But the way God gave it, and the way even the Arab people knew it, because they're monotheistic too. They were believing in all this before we came along. And so the picture of God and his word in the stars were believed by many cultures, many societies, and they had words that were prophetic, even though they may not ring true to us today. So interesting that Taurus is called Isis. Now there's a couple other things you should know about Taurus. It's one of the biggest constellations in the sky. It's at least 141 stars, 141 stars that we know of. So there's all kinds of little stars. Taurus is huge. Taurus takes up a huge portion of the sky. Just like when Messiah comes, he's going to live somewhere on earth, but the influence of him will be everywhere. And the other thing is that Taurus is the place that the Pleiades live. Now, you've heard a lot about the Pleiades. In fact, the Pleiades is the most mentioned named in the Bible, most constellation most named in the Bible. Well, guess where it lives? In the head of Taurus. The brain of Taurus contains Pleiades, which means the congregation of the judge or the congregation of the ruler. And guess where we're going to live? Guess who's our head? Guess whose body we're part of? We're going to be inside the inner circle of Taurus, the judge, the ruler. The Pleiades is a picture of us. It's talked about it. It's the most mentioned constellation in the Old Testament, and it's a picture of us everywhere you see it. So, Taurus is very important. And what's going to happen in Taurus is even more important. So this is the fall of 2024. And how many years is that from the fall of 2017? Exactly 7 years. So we went on a Rosh Hashanah. The next 7 years, I believe, are the days of awe. So the book of the tribulation is the 7 years where people are going to have to decide whether to obey or disobey. And all kinds of bad things are going to happen, a lot of which, I think probably more of which, are going to show up in the heavens than even I've said, because we got to get the dragon red and all 100-pound rocks, all that's got to happen. So lots going to happen in the heavens. Lots more is going to happen on earth. But when that 7 years is over, one, we're going to see it in the sky, and two, you're going to see things on the earth. But if you haven't decided during the days of awe, you've got real trouble. So let's look what happens during the fall feasts in Taurus 7 years from next year. And that is this. So Yeshua, on that, so we're going to go through 7 years. There's going to be 7 Rosh Hashanahs, 7 Yom Kippur, 7 Feasts of Tabernacles, on which nothing is going to happen, actually 6. But on the 7th year, after all this happens, on that Yom Kippur, which is October 12th, 2024, on October 12th, 2024, at sunset, that's going to be Yom Kippur. I believe that's the day, sometime during that day, and if we were Jewish and knew more about Yom Kippur, we would probably know the exact moment this is going to occur, but looking through our Gentile mind, we don't know. But his feet are going to touch down on the Mount of Olives on Yom Kippur. And the moment his feet touch down, now a lot of things happen. Since the Mount of Olives splits, fresh water comes out from underneath it. I mean, all this crazy stuff starts to happen on earth. But one thing that's going to happen in heaven is the book of life will close. The instant his feet touch down, the gates of heaven will close, the door of heaven will close, however you picture it. At the moment his feet touch, your ability to decide for Christ is over. And so if you've not decided at that moment, you're going to be lost for all eternity. Your life will end very soon after that with no chance of parole. So on that Yom Kippur, when his feet touch the ground, he will be the judge of all the earth. He will be the ruler over all the earth. He will be our Taurus for the rest of time. And on that moment is when the sixth feast begins its fulfillment. And so, again, this is, reading from the Old and New Testament. I've showed you these verses, but let's read the one from Revelation chapter 1. It says, look, he is coming with the clouds. This is going to be that Rosh Hashanah. Look, he's coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. The Jewish people who, you could say forsake him or whatever. I mean, they're not at fault for crucifying the Messiah. We're all at fault for crucifying the Messiah. But the Jewish people who haven't gotten it to that point, when they see him coming in the clouds, now remember, his feet have not touched the earth yet. So they have those moments when they're going to see him, they're going to go, oh my gosh, he was the one. And I believe in those moments, as long as they are, many Jews will become messianic in that instant. And they will recognize him who they've pierced, him who they've forsaken, him who they've not considered. And it says they will mourn because of them. And I think at that moment, we'll have even more people born again who will suddenly get it. And it will take his coming in the clouds with us, by the way, that a lot of people are going to get born again in that instant because they're going to recognize him as the scripture says. So they will recognize him and they'll mourn because they'll realize how much they've missed. But I think they will get it, and I think a lot of them will get on the boat. So his feet touch down on the Mount of Olives. The Battle of Armageddon takes place. He subdues the earth. Satan is bound. All this is going to happen in a very short order. 5 days later, so this is 2024, 5 days later, so this is October 17th, sunset, October 17th, 2024, the millennial kingdom will begin in earnest. So all the prophecies of the earth being cleansed, we're going to spend a lot of time doing that. It's when all people come to Israel to see the prince is going to live in Israel. All the thing about the crops are going to grow like crazy. True justice will reign on the earth. All this is going to begin on that Tabernacles 2017. October 17, 2024. So there's going to be 1,000 years of justice on earth, 1,000 years of peace on earth. And if you're like me, you just crave this stuff. You crave justice with all the nasty stuff going on earth. I just crave someone who's going to have a rod of iron and bust the heads of those who are, too ignorant to see or too prideful to get it or whatever. I crave that day when there's going to be peace and justice on earth. And so you're thinking, well, maybe that's the end of my story. You wish. So the same way we had to go to the end of the 7 years and look to see if something was going to happen. Now we need to go to the end of 1,000 years and see if something important is going to happen. And guess what the answer is? Oh, yes, you guessed it. Absolutely true. At the end of 1,000 years, a whole slew of things are going to happen. And I'll tell you right now, I know the least amount about this, but I'm going to tell you three things. Right, among the things I'm going to tell you, one, this is absolutely going to happen because the stars don't lie. Two, it's going to mean something in the time that it happens. And I'll give you my thoughts on that. And I'll tell you this right now. Three, from seeing this in the future, I saw something that occurred 6,000 years ago. I saw something, looking at this just in the last 2 days, I saw a pattern of something that absolutely is going to happen 1,000 years, so 3013, and in a few years after that, a pattern of something so amazing happens that I thought, oh my gosh, that's bizarre. And I went back and looked, and this time I go all the way back before creation. I go like 4,500 years, so 500 years before creation, because you can fool me twice, shame on me. Now I look way back at the year 4000 to the year 3999 BC. One of these patterns happened. I can't tell you what it means, but I'm going to tell you it's the right time for the day of creation, and it happened. So I'll show you. Hang on. All right, so I went ahead 3013, and guess what? An amazing thing happens. Something that I've never seen before, something that, through my limited view of a couple hundred years back and forth, mainly I've looked at the time when Jesus was born a couple hundred years back and forth, and the time we live now, a couple hundred years back and forth. But this time, like I say, I went all the way back to creation. So now I'm much wiser. But something happened that is just so interesting that it has to mean something. I'm going to tell you, I don't know what it means, but it's going to happen at the end of the millennial kingdom, and it happened at 4000 BC. And so I can't tell you what it means, but here it is. You know how Jupiter entered the abdomen of Virgo for 9 months? That's happened twice. Saturn entered the abdomen of Virgo for a year. Didn't touch the edges, didn't leave the box. Exactly a year. October 7th, 2013, or no, October 7th, 3012 to October 7th, 2013. It stays inside that box for a year. Now, I can't tell you what that means. I mean, Satan in the womb of the woman. I don't know what that means, but I will tell you this. It means something very important. And the reason is because of this. The last time it happened could be the day of creation. You'll notice it's in the fall. I believe the first day of creation was a Tishri 1, when it was not only the Jewish New Year, it was everybody's New Year. And then on Tishri 1 was the first day of creation when God said, let there be light. Now, I've not gone back to look at this, but I'll bet September 3rd, which is in the fall, the same time as Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to bet that this day or someday very close to it was Tishri 1, Rosh Hashanah, the first one of all creation. Because at the same time, this sign happened before. Satan, who back then may have been in good standing, I mean, who knows, was birthed by God over a year. I mean, whatever that means, was in the abdomen of Virgo for a year. Again, I can't tell you what that means, but the pattern only happens when something big is going on. And so it's got to mean something, and we need to figure out what that is. All right, so now let's go back to 3013. So 3013, at the time that Saturn is in the womb of Virgo, Jupiter meets up with Saturn in the womb of Virgo. Again, this is 1,000 years, give or take a couple of years, 1,000 years from when all this trouble began. So does that mean something? And again, they have this back and forth fight just like they did during the tribulation period. They have this back and forth fight now that lasts for several months, well, several weeks anyway. And then Jupiter overtakes Saturn on December 12th, 2013, now, or 3013. You know, now the other pattern I've not talked about is the Festival of Lights. And, you know, there's a Jewish festival that happens in December called the Festival of Lights. And could some of these things correlate with those as well? We've seen several things that happen in December, you know, like the fight between Michael and Satan that happened in September, or December rather. This is happening in December. So the Festival of Lights may enter in here too, as well. I just have not looked that deeply. Okay, so they had this big battle. So now we have to ask ourselves, what does this mean? So this is the end of the millennial kingdom. So at the end of the millennial kingdom, Satan gets loose. Satan has to get loose, and then Satan has to get bound and finally destroyed. So at the end of the millennial kingdom, there's got to be something in the sky, I think, that shows Satan gets loose, and there's got to be something in the sky sometime later that shows Satan gets destroyed once and for all. Now, I have two perspectives on this, and I'll give you both of them, and neither one of them might be right. The first might be is that when this back and forth struggle begins in the womb of Virgo, it's the time when he's loosed, and then just a few days later, a couple of weeks later, in December 3013, is when Saturn or Jupiter overtakes Saturn and Satan is destroyed. So it could be he gets loose in October of 3013 and destroyed in December of 3013. But there's one bigger picture. And that's why until I saw this, I was thinking, oh yeah, this is it. But now I don't know. Now I'm not so sure. And I'll show you why that is. And it's because I saw what happens in Taurus. And so I looked in Taurus farther down the road because, remember, Jesus conquers the earth in Taurus. And so I'm thinking, does Jesus conquer everything in Taurus? And this happens now in Taurus. And so that's why I'm saying, wow, maybe there's a bigger thing going on. Hang on. Oh, I lost it. Act as if nothing is wrong. All right, you got it back again? Okay, let's see. Okay, all right, so I talked about it, but it had it on the screen at once. So does Satan get loose and caught in 3013, or does Satan get loose and actually romp around on the earth for several more years, actually a couple of decades? And the reason I say that is because in 3032, between the horns of Taurus, now remember, at the end of the millennial kingdom, Jupiter is between the horns of Taurus, and it's right in the fall, right at Yom Kippur, when Jesus comes back to the earth in Yom Kippur of 2024. So 1,000 years and 1,000 years and a couple decades later, in 3032, Jupiter is between the horns of Taurus again, but something different happens this time, and that's that Saturn meets up with Jupiter, and guess what appears? And the moment they meet, guess what appears right between them? Again, it's Mars. So the exact same picture we saw when Jupiter and Saturn tangled for the first time during the tribulation period, and Mars appeared directly between them. In 3032, when Jupiter and Saturn tangle again, Mars appears right between them, just before they meet completely. So again, the pattern's there, but what exactly that means, I don't know. So the timing, I'm not sure, but at some point, once Satan is destroyed, and the end of the millennial, and which will be the end of the millennial kingdom, the final feast to be fulfilled is the 8th day. And the 8th day is all about the new heaven and earth. The new Jerusalem's going to come down. All evil will be destroyed. No more death, no more tears. We're going to dwell forever with God. We're going to tabernacle with God. God's going to tabernacle with us forever. And the 8th day is the final feast, and we're going to live with God forever. So the whole patterns are there. The intricacy is way more beyond what I've said already. And we need to look at it deeper and deeper. And every day you're going to see something new. And every day, especially as the information that we have in the world around us gets more complete, we're going to see things bigger and bigger. All right, so that is the thumbnail sketch of what's going to happen in the next several months. And I am, in my mind, I'm thinking time is short. I mean, I hope I'm right, but if I'm wrong, the time isn't short. And I'm happy to do that as well. I'm still preparing for whatever might come up, but I'm hoping that our time is short, and we need to live like that anyway. We should live like we got just a few weeks or a few months. We should be telling everybody we know about Messiah, about the intricacies of all these patterns, about what's going on in the stars, and how the reflection of that is happening on earth, and that there's no question in our minds that the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords not only is taking care of us now, but is going to take care of us in the future. So God bless you. I love you. Keep looking up.